Introducing Foundry Wax. So this product, this is a brand new product to the world of distress. And I have to say, I absolutely love this product. And here's the thing, Foundry Wax, this is a product that has been in development since 2019. You know, people ask, how long does it take to develop a product or create a product? And there's really not a specific time, right? The whole thing about it is that when it's ready to go to market, then we release it to market. But Foundry Wax was something that I really wanted to bring to the market in a unique way. I know there are a lot of waxes out on the market in the craft and hobby industry, as well as even like in the furniture industry, believe it or not. But I wanted something that would be unique and different. And that's what I hope to share with you during this live demo, is to talk about the properties of this product, how it is different, what makes it unique, and really what it does, okay? So many of you guys kind of guessed from that photo that I shared yesterday. The whole idea behind Foundry Wax is, you know, a foundry, of course, is a place where they melt down metal and create castings. And that was kind of the reason behind the name for this product, because this particular product does require heat to work, which is very cool. And heat will transform this product into something absolutely amazing. So I wanted to kind of give you this feel, this vibe for what Foundry Wax is, a very industrial vibe, because it is metallic. So Foundry Wax is available in 2 kits. This is how it's sold. It's available in 2 kits. The reason is I wanted to provide as much education, so a shout out to Ranger for agreeing to launch it this way. Will they be available open stock? Maybe someday in the future, but right now it's oil can. Right now it is available in 2 kits. Now the colors, Gilded and Mined, and Sterling and Statue. And I'll talk about it in the demo. These are the same colors as the alloys, but these are not alcohol inks. But there are some things that we're going to need to discuss as far as safety and use, and I'll get to all that in the demo. But right now, these are the 2 new SKUs of Foundry Wax. So are you ready to go? I'm gonna pick this little table up. It's like smoke and mirrors. Look at that display. Portable display. And then we can go, yeah, it's cool, right? And then we go right to, oh, see, he's making fun of me because I literally did that entire display 10 minutes before we went live, because that's how I like to roll. Because I was like, you know what? I just didn't want it sitting there. I've got a bunch of old stuff around the studio. That's what we need, right? Okay. So let's get into the demo and talk about Foundry Wax, what they are, how they work, what you do with them. So first thing you're going to notice is that they are in an alcohol ink type bottle, because it is a solvent-based medium. So there is a flammable warning on there. It doesn't have all the same warnings of alcohol ink, because these are not alcohol ink. These are not alcohol ink. These are not alloy. These are not mixatives. They are nothing even close to any of those products. It is its own product. However, it is flammable, which means that you want to work in a well-ventilated area when you work with it. As with any type of art medium, you know, there are some safety things that we'll talk about that you need to keep in mind, that some people say, you know, do I need to wear a respirator for this? Do I need to do this? That's really up to you and your own, you know, personal choices as far as, you know, if you have reactions to certain things. To me, these do not have as high of a solvent vapor or smell that alcohol inks do. That's just in my opinion, and I think the opinion of many of the makers that have used this. But it is, because it's flammable, it needs to be used in a well-ventilated area, okay? So when you work with these, you're going to notice several things, and I'm going to take you through from the colors into all of the do's and don'ts, the tools, and even techniques. So this demo will be just a lot of fun, but definitely a process as we go, okay? So first we need to talk about the colors. Now there are 4 colors in here, and what's important to understand about the colors, the reason there are 4 colors in this line is because these are using real leafing metals, okay? So the first question would be, are they gonna come out in other colors? No, they are not gonna come out in any other colors. These are the 4 colors, and these are the colors that will remain. We don't plan on doing this in any other, you know, turquoise or pinks or greens or any of that, because the idea for Foundry Wax is to add a metallic leafing accent to your makes. And they work on a variety of surfaces. I'll get into all the surfaces as well, but it is about true metallic. Okay, so that's the first thing you need to understand, that its core, it's really just these 4 colors. That's what it is. Now there are things that we can do to actually utilize these and incorporate them with colors of other mediums, but they do belong in the distress world because they are designed to work with distress beautifully. And we're going to talk about working with inks and sprays and oxides and all sorts of things. But first things first, we're going to talk about their properties and how you utilize them. So these wax, because they come in that alcohol ink bottle, it is a high density plastic bottle, right? That's why we have that bottle. They do need to be shaken. There's a mixing ball, okay? And because of that, that's going to mix that solvent and pigment. But you need to understand that these are all very unique, even within themselves, because they contain a true leafing metallic in each one. Each color has a completely different viscosity, okay? Completely different viscosity. When you work with them, this one might be a little thicker than this one. This one might be a little thicker than this one. Sterling is the thickest. So like if you hear it, you hear like a little mixing, but you don't hear the same rattle as you do in gilded. So that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with this, right? Sterling is just thicker because I wanted a very, very vibrant silver finish, right? Sterling silver finish. And so it has more leafing metallic than the other colors, right? In order to get that reflective, almost mirror-like finish. So you can still shake it and you'll actually kind of feel it. You might even hear that ball like just knock around a little bit, but not the same as these. So I want you to know, because I know sometimes people get something new and they just shake them and like, oh, something's wrong right away. No, just know that they're all going to be different. The other thing you're going to notice, and I'll just shake this up real quick, when you open these bottles, okay, the nib of these bottles is larger than an alcohol ink nib. It has a larger opening. It needs to have a larger opening because foundry wax, well, it is in fact a wax, okay? These are not inks, although they come in a bottle and they make you think that it's an ink or some type of ink property, but in fact, it is a fluid wax. But what makes foundry wax really cool is the fact that it starts out as a liquid. As soon as air hits it, it starts to turn into a cream-like consistency. And the longer the air hits it, it will turn into a solid and actually turn into just dust. It will completely evaporate. But once you apply heat to it, it becomes a solid, an impermeable solid, which is really cool. So let's go in and swatch the colors, and then we'll talk about surfaces and differences in looks and feels and all that. It's pretty cool stuff. So for metallics, usually when it comes to using anything metallic, working on a darker substrate is going to give you the best effect, I guess, if you will. The best effect. Thanks, everyone. I see everyone like, I can't wait to see it. Look at it. Very cool. Hey, guys. Hey, Vicky. Hey, Stacey. Yeah, I agree, Ted. Dreamy, creamy. Okay. It is very scientific, Carrie, and that's the thing. That's why it took us so many years to formulate, because a shout out to Steve, who is the chemist at Ranger that I worked with on this product. It evolved. It really did. I mean, I actually started when I wanted to do wax in the Distress line. I actually went down that wax route because most of the waxes on the market are beeswax based, right? So it is a solid that you kind of put your finger in or a brush and you rub it on because it's beeswax. This is not a beeswax at all. This is a completely different wax, a completely different delivery system, a completely different vehicle, because that vehicle would be a flammable solvent. But it's really cool because it gives us some really unique effects, okay? So when you work with them, you can work on glass directly. Like if you have a glass mat, you can work directly on that. Or you can also work on your nonstick mat. So if you have a craft sheet, or if you have your nonstick mat on your media mat, you can leave this here because these will not stain this, because again, they are not alcohol ink, okay? But it just depends on like what you feel. I prefer to kind of work on this. Let me work that bubble out. There we go. I prefer to work on this just because I'm getting a little bit more grip, but you know, again, it's totally up to you. I'm going to start with just a piece of black cardstock. Now, much of the time when I'm sharing in this demo, my black cardstock of choice is the alcohol ink black cardstock. If you haven't tried this stuff, this is a true black core cardstock, but it has a unique finish. It's designed for alcohol ink, so it's not going to soak through, but it almost has like a suede finish, and it's really a dark black. And that, of course, is going to give it the most drama. But I'm going to share the wax on craft and white and ink and all that. So don't think it can only work on black paper. All right. So I'm going to give it a little shake. Now, anything that I need to shake, whether that is an ink or a spray, and I know I need to shake it up, I like to lay the bottles on their side because to me, it just makes it a little bit easier to do that. Okay. because then it mixes up much quicker. Instead of having everything sit at the bottom, everything lays on the side. So what I'll do is I'll just start with my sheet of black paper. Now let's just talk about the instructions, okay? It talks about shaking the bottle until mixing ball rattles. Now again, I've already talked about sterling. You may not hear that mixing ball rattle, but you'll feel it, is the only way I can describe that, okay? Because we need to mix that pigments into the wax. Then you're going to apply drops of wax to a craft sheet, okay? That could be a non-stick surface or glass, but you want something that's going to be non-porous that we can work with it. Then it says apply directly to surface using a dry paintbrush. Now the reason it says that is because it is a solvent, and for safety reasons, you can't really suggest to someone to apply it using their skin if it's a solvent, because everybody has different reactions. Some people are very sensitive to solvents. I personally have applied it with my finger. I like to apply these with my finger because I'm a touchy kind of person and I don't have any reaction, but that is why it suggests a dry brush. And I will talk about brushes, and I will demo different brushes of how to apply it. If you are one of those people that tactile people and you like to apply things with your finger, but you have a sensitivity to solvents in general, you can go in and use a glove, right? So you can still use a glove. This isn't going to damage a glove if you do that, or put on a finger cot if you just want to use one finger. But you'll see why, like when I use my finger, I just like that. But because of all of the, the requirements to put on a label, that's why it says dry brush. And then the last step is going to be heat with heat tool to transform the finish. Then you're going to see that. And of course it says work in a well-ventilated area. All right. So here we go. So I do see a couple questions about availability. Yes, these started shipping last week from Ranger, so they are available. I will tell you that because it's flammable, global, it takes a little bit longer to get there because, again, this cannot go by air anywhere. So it does take a little bit longer. But yes, they will be available worldwide, and they are available now. Here we go. We're going to shake it up. And I'm just going to put some right on that craft mat. So you'll see that when you apply it, it's a fairly liquid form right now. Now, as soon as this hits the air, it has already started to thicken up. And we're talking seconds here, not minutes, not hours, seconds. When I first touch it, it is clearly a liquid. You can see almost ink-like, if you will. And I can pick this up and just apply it directly to the surface. But you'll see right away when it hits that surface, you get that little skippity bit that you would get with a wax, right? That cool rubbing effect just on regular paper. And you can see in there, its viscosity, it's already starting to thicken up. And you can even see, like on the craft mat, that when your fingerprint doesn't heal, meaning, when you swipe this across, or your brush for that matter, and it doesn't fill in the blanks, it's starting to thicken up. The great thing about this is that you can apply it over itself. You can build up layers. But you'll also see here that as I'm touching it, see as it's drying, now it's just turning into dust. It's disappearing, if you will, because that's pretty much your open time for the wax. Now, I still have some on my finger, right? It's still going to remain, like if I wanted to just rub it onto something, you would still be able to rub it on even in a very light or dry effect if you want, if you don't want to put it on thick, but I'll get to that. So just so you know. So how do you clean it? How do you clean it off your hands? Well, you have options, really. I just work with water, so you can use water just to clean that off, okay? You can also use a baby wipe, but it is a solvent base, so to truly clean it, meaning if you wanted to take every little bit off of your fingers or your brush, and I'll get to that as well, you would clean it with alcohol, just isopropyl alcohol. That's going to clean it up just fine. So let me just wipe that off, but it just comes off with a dry paper towel off of a craft sheet, okay? So I'm just going to go through each color first, and then we'll do the whole kind of transforming thing. So Gilded was the first color. This is Mind, okay? The solvent does evaporate. But the solvent is actually the delivery system for this wax, because it's still a wax in there, right? So again, when you touch it, liquid. And you can wait, and again, I'm going to work on embossed papers and all sorts of things so you can see, well, how do you apply it to different substrates? Because the thing about working with foundry wax is once you get the feel of it, honestly, the tactile feel, you will understand it so much more, how to apply it and what to apply it on. And the best part of this, of course, we were able to get this in the hands of makers. So following this live, there will be a lot of inspiration out there from makers. Many of them, I'm sure, have tutorials that will probably walk you through their experience with it as well. So this next one is Sterling, so you didn't really hear anything, right? just shakety shake. Magic is definitely coming. You guys haven't even seen the magic. It is a magical thing when you see it. All right. So here's sterling. Oh, see, I love sterling right out of the bottle because it's that perfect silver, right? And you can see already, see how that starts to thicken up? It would stay like that. That's the other thing, because again, it's a wax, not an ink. But if you didn't want that, you still have the ability to kind of smooth it out a little bit. So you get that creamy, well, you know, if you've used any type of wax and you get that creamy, I just call it like a little skippity bit, because that's what it does. It just kind of skips across the surface. Oh, I love that. All right. Then this next one, statue, probably one of my favorite colors of all, because I don't know why. It's just like a brass statue. It's not super gold, it's not super copper, it's just super good, but probably because it looks brown. Maybe that would be why. But again, you see, starts out really liquid, and it just goes onto that paper, and as soon as the air hits it, yeah, it's turning into a cream. It just is. So if I'll show you, just like, I don't want to waste any, but I'll show you some stuff when we get really into the demo. Right now we're just swatching colors. Okay, so at this point we've applied this to the paper. You can see all 4 colors. Beautiful. Now the key to Foundry Wax is that you must heat it. It's not an option. You can't say, well, can I let it air dry? No. Can I let it sit in the sun? No. You have to heat it to transform its finish. It's no different than when you do embossing powder, right? You need to melt the embossing powder for the embossing powder to work. If you do not heat set Foundry Wax, it will completely rub off, okay? What we need to do is transform the finish, because right now, yeah, it looks beautiful, but wait until you see the magic of Foundry Wax. Now, you can use a regular embossing gun. That's what I'm going to use. You can also use the Ranger heat tool. Both of these will get hot enough to melt the Foundry Wax, but it has a lower melting point than embossing powder, right? Embossing powder needs 340 degrees to melt. This has a melting point at about 125, okay, which is still hotter than a hairdryer, so you want to use that. I like to use an embossing gun because it's quicker, right? So I'll hold this up just so you can see the transformation right before your eyes. It is amazing. Are you ready? We're going to turn it on. We'll start up here on the top with gilded. So it's going to go from that finish, and you'll see it turn just like you see like embossing powder turn, right? See that? It goes right across. It's just like scanning a barcode. Here's Mind, right across. Here's Sterling, right across. And here is Statue, right across. And just like that, it is finished. Doesn't require anything. And this is what it transformed into. Actual leafed metallic. So it went from a regular finish to a reflective leafing. Think of it as almost like liquid leafing. The wax is completely dry, completely cool, and completely permanent. And the big difference is, like, maybe you have the alcohol alloys. You're like, oh, well, I'm sure it looks just like the alloys. Except it doesn't. No, because the alloys, these are for alcohol ink. You put these in alcohol ink, they break up, they do all of those. But these alloys have been on this paper for about a month, and they will continue to flume. Flume meaning when you touch it, even if you heat set this, it's going to come off on your fingers. It's never set. Once you heat this, this is completely permanent. It won't move, it won't do anything. It is done. But its reflectiveness it's absolutely crazy. Like, the camera can't even really pick it up. It's amazing. There's another swatch, but you can see the light just blurs it out because it is a leafing metallic. That's the cool thing about Foundry Wax. Now, I'm not here to do a direct comparison with any wax on the market. I'm not going to call out wax by name, but I think in all fairness, I need to show a visual difference between beeswax-based waxes and what Foundry Wax does as a finish. So this is a beeswax-based wax, right? A regular wax that you would rub over the paper, and it's beautiful all on its own. It still gives you that wonderful luster, that wonderful metallic. But Foundry Wax, well, it's significantly different, right? Because what it's designed to do, I like this effect. I've always liked that effect of wax, but I really wanted that gilding look, almost like foil, right? Almost that beautiful reflection, but I still want to be able to create that Well, that skippity bit, right? That part in there, I didn't want just to add foil because foil is a solid. And if you just add foil, you don't get all of that extra magic in there. But you can see just from the light hitting it, the different type of reflective property. Usually this is a mica powder that's adding that sheen, where this is actually leafing metal, okay? And that is why it can only come in the natural colors of that metal. It can't come in teal and pink. And have I tried to tint it with alcohol ink? Yes, I've tried to tint it, and it will look tinted on your sheet. But because this is a leafing metallic, as soon as heat is applied to foundry wax, that leafing comes to the surface and covers. So let's just say you're like, ooh, but Tim, I use my rinker and I mix it. Look, it's blue. You watch, as soon as you heat it, whatever color you use, that leafing rises to the top, and that is what sits on the surface, that wonderful leafing finish. So now we're going to get into the fun of foundry wax, because the colors, wow, they're absolutely incredible to use. So a couple of points. First, every time you work with these, you need to replace the cap immediately, okay? So it's not, again, like inks where you can leave them open and work with it. When you apply some, you put the cap on and you're done. Second, when you're done using these, or even if you're working with them, keep them away from your work area, right? And I'm only telling you this because when I was testing these out, I made a huge mistake that I didn't even realize, which was I put my wax on there, right? Set the bottle over there, you know, had the lid on, it was all good. Did my whatever I was doing, and then I went in and started heating. But my heat was right next to the bottle. And if you apply heat to your bottle, you will solidify the bottle. There's no reconstituting, there's no magic to bring it back to life. If you heat this, you have turned it into a solid. So now let's just break it down on the craft sheet, just so you can see, without just using it, how it changes without really applying it to anything, okay? So here it is as a liquid. So we can see that as we move it around, right, it's a liquid. And this is what I was saying, that like it doesn't, you can see, you don't see my finger marks in here because it's liquid, it's kind of self-healing. But now I've waited a little bit longer. Oh, see, already started to thicken up because now you can see my fingerprints in there, okay? Leave it there for a few more seconds. I haven't done anything to it, just it's air hitting it. Then as I go in and keep touching it, oh, now I don't even leave a fingerprint, right? Because now it's thickening up where it's building up on my finger. This is where it's nice, where it becomes that cool kind of cream to it, okay? But now if I keep touching it, now it's gone, right? And on my finger, it'll actually just start wiping off because now it's just a powder. So this stuff right here, right? I'll just take a clean finger. It's just a powder that's gone, right? And you could even see it like almost dusting off. So this goes from a liquid, right, to a cream, to a creamier cream, to just powder. It's gone, it evaporates, okay? But when you heat it, it becomes a solid. Absolutely incredible chemistry in there, because the beauty of this, and I'll even put in a little, so you can use, like, if you want to clean that off, because we want to clean it off, we can use solvent, so that would be hand sanitizer. So hand sanitizer will also take it off of your fingers, or you can use just isopropyl alcohol if you want to do that, right? So that cleans it if you needed to, right? But we're going to get into how we work with it. So people say, well, gosh, you know, if I store it in the heat, is it going to, we test all of that. We do oven testing to make sure that it's not, I live in Arizona, that it's not going to harden sitting on your shelf. But if you kept it like in a moving truck that got up to, you know, 150, 200 degrees, well, then that's on you. So it's not something that you need to keep like in the shadows or shade. It's just something that you don't want to heat with your heat tool. All right, unless you're ready to go. Ready to go, ready to go, ready to go. Here we are. We're going to go through little by little, and I'm going to demo all the substrates now, because it's not just for paper. So we'll get there. First off, embossing folders, right? I love a good embossing folder. I think embossing folders are amazing, whether they're 3D or whether they're regular embossing folders. But let's face it, in our industry now, we love a good 3D design, right? We can do a lot of different things, and I'm going to play around with different papers to show you that, in fact, you can change up how you work with this, I guess, so to speak. And it will work everything from white to black to craft. But first, we'll just go on regular black cardstock. So again, this is the alcohol ink cardstock. I really love that. If you're going to apply this, you want to apply it to a raised surface. That's because the high points are what's going to hit the wax. But I'm also going to show you on something like this. This is a really cool one. So this doesn't have nearly the high points as say this multi-level, right? It still has some texture, but you can see most of it is in the detail. So I want to talk about, well, how do we apply it depending on height or texture. Then I'm going to use craft, and we'll even play around with some white. Because another thing to keep in mind is that when you're working with this, once you've applied it to the substrate, you don't have to apply heat right away, okay? You have time to apply heat. You can do that at any time. You can do that later if you want. Let me do that one too. I don't know, I'll probably do this one too. Well, you know, I've got to bring a few out. Otherwise, I'll just keep digging through designs all the time. But essentially, this is watercolor cardstock, black alcohol ink cardstock, and mixed media craft because I like that thicker paper. But you can play around with different cardstocks. Because what we're going to do is we're going to just create some different effects on these papers by how the medium is applied. So first one, we're just going to take an embossed piece of cardstock. We'll take a little bit of gilded, put some out there, and I'm just going to use my finger. Now, if I take from this liquid state and I go right to my paper, chances are it's going to go in all the areas because it's so wet. So what we want to do instead is just kind of give it a second till you can start seeing your fingerprints in there, but not too long, but so you can see those finger marks. Then to me, that's a really good consistency to start swiping over that paper. Okay, it's still nice that I can just use my finger, just kind of open your hand and leave it flat. And that's going to really allow that buildup of color in the areas. But now you can see it's starting to get creamy. Now I can go into those solid areas with that cream. See, I can hit those wider areas more, but I can also just use it and just kind of lightly just rub the rest of that in this area because you don't always have to put it on thick. Okay, so here we went from kind of thick, right, built up to thin, and it's gone. Now, could you apply more? Sure, if you wanted more, we could apply another, I don't need more, but I will, just apply another little drip there. Because you can apply wax over wax before or after you heat it. Either way, okay? So here if I'm like, oh, you know what, I really want those bigger flourishes to really pop on there. Okay, well that's what I'll do. I'll do that, but then I'm just gonna leave the rest undone, okay? And let me just take a paper towel, clean this, great. This, it's dry paper towel, I can just take off the excess. We'll move this one off to the side. Then we'll talk about like, well, what if we have some other textures? There's some other ways that we can work with it. Let's take some statue. This is a good one. We're going to do a brush on this one. So here I'm just going to add a bit of statue to start. Now for brushes, I found that a soft brush is going to be best, right? Not a rigid brush and not a domed brush. I'm not a fan of even using the blending brush for this because that contour, that's going to get in all of the areas. We want something that's going to be soft and flat. We're going to pick up some of this wax, okay? And just kind of move that. And then you're just going to dry brush over the top. Now, with a brush, you don't apply nearly as much as you do with your fingers, okay? That's just how it is because it's already starting to really dry on the bristles. And you don't have a lot of time, but that's okay. You just kind of want to work. And I'm working in different directions, back and forth, and you can see I'm just putting a little bit on my brush at a time. I'm not loading up my brush. Think of it as dry brushing, right? Because what you're going to also be reminded of when it comes to foundry wax is that when these are heated, that's where they really transform even more. So sometimes you'll look at the surface, you're like, oh, I don't really see much going on. But when you heat it, you will, okay? So just a soft brush, back and forth, and that's our layer right now, right? I love that effect, but still we haven't heated it. This stuff, it's all dry, and even in the brush, I don't know if it's gonna show up on camera. There, you see the dust? It's just turned into dust on the brush. The brush is still completely soft, right? It's not gunky, it's nothing. So how do you clean your brush? Well, you don't have to clean your brush if you don't want to. You can just go in a dry paper towel because it's gone. But if you had a color and you wanted the color gone, You could just put this in isopropyl alcohol. That would take out, because there is some color in the bristles, right? There's a little bit of that statue color. You notice it more with Mind because that's a copper color. But that's how you would clean a brush if you were going to use it with paint or anything. Just a little isopropyl that would take out the color, rinse it in water, and you're good to go. But that's the nice thing about a brush. It is magic to think that you just brushed on wax and your brush is completely dry. It doesn't make any sense, but hey, I'm not the chemist. I didn't have to figure it out. Steve did, and he's amazing like that. Okay, so next I'm going to take some sterling. I'm going to put some of this down. And again, I'm going to go in with the brush. And this time I'm going to pick this up. I'm going to go just a little bit wetter, right from the start, and just kind of hit those points, because this particular folder, this rose, there's more texture than the gears. So to me, I feel that I can probably grab those high points a little quicker than I would over another background. So this is going to allow me to almost paint the detail on these elements. I still don't mind if I get some off the area, right? And then I'm just going to drag this down because I just want to create some of those lines in there. All right, so here's this one. Okay, haven't done anything, but see, I like those dry brush lines. If you don't, then don't put it over the rest of it. Just hit the high points and be done. Okay, and again, right, if I show you here, not that I want all these powders just to fly around, but it's just completely dry. All right. So let's take another one, something really textured that has some different levels. Now I'll go in with Mind. This will be nice, a nice coppery color. We'll squeeze some of that out. Again, just using my finger. And for this, I'm just going to lightly go over those highest points of the letters first. Okay, while it's liquid, because I can tell from this folder it's got a lot of different texture, right? So I don't mind some of this getting a little on the gunky side. All right, so now it's starting to get creamier. So now I really want to start working this into the rest of the folder. Okay, keep working with that. And just work that in, because everything that you would do with a wax, you could still do. And when I say a wax, it is a wax, but everything you can do with let's say a paste wax, you can still do with foundry wax. You just have to know at which time you want to add it. So could you add another color? Sure. If we wanted to take, maybe we want to add just a little bit of statue to the top, we can. Could you mix colors? Yes. If you wanted to maybe have something that's kind of platinum with a little bit of silver and gold, you can put both of them down and you can mix them into one color. Obviously your mixing time, you know, that takes care of your open time, but you can quickly mix it and go for it. But here I'm just going to add a little bit of statue to these top letters over that Mind background. Pretty cool. Easy to do, right? Okay, now let's move on to another one. We'll take this. I love that damask. That's really a beautiful one. We'll do some gold on here. Put those on. There we are. We'll take a brush, put that on, and just start kind of dry brushing, right? And I'll play around with some different colors on this one just because we can. Or actually forget different colors. I'll just show you some different ways that we can apply it. So this side, I'll just do with a brush. How about that? Okay. You can see there's a little sheen on there. The other side, I'll take the same color, a little bit of gilded. Now I do know that there's some sterling in that brush, which is really pretty. I like the finish of that. But just to show you the difference of honestly how you apply it, what tools, and you might come up with different tools. I'm even going to show you like a blending tool, because you can use a blending tool for certain things to get a finish. There's a lot going on in this demo. I'm telling you what, I have a lot of ideas planned for you guys, because it has to go from the simple to the wow, I think. And this is already wow. So you can only imagine all the things that you could essentially do. And then we'll take this one. What do I want to do with this? Oh gosh, I think I'm going to go. I try to stay away from statue, but man, should you wear a mask using this product? Again, your safety concerns are your safety concerns. If you feel more comfortable wearing a mask, wear a mask. The only way that those powders became airborne is because I was flicking the brush. Other than that, there are no powders, right? Because this is not it's a fluid. I was just showing you that it was It could be powdery, but yes, if you're sensitive to that type of stuff, then you need to wear whatever type of gear you feel comfortable doing, right? I just like to work in a well-ventilated area because it is a solvent-based medium. So to me, that's really important to either have a fan or a window open, right? But that works for me. So as far as other tools, right? So like, could you use a brayer? No, not really. You couldn't, because by the time you coated the brayer, this is not going to transfer off the brayer. It has already become a cream and it's not going to transfer. So I wouldn't suggest using a brayer. Could you stamp with it? No. You're not going to be able to get it on the stamp and off. I mean, I'm sure you could, but it's just not worth it because there's so much cleaning involved to take that medium off. And I think with anything, you need to use it for what its intended use is. You know, everybody can be their own chemist and their own alchemist and try to figure stuff out. However, when it comes to working with a product, you need to keep in mind that a product is designed to do a specific thing. And just because somebody else did it or shared a YouTube video, it doesn't mean that it was designed to specifically do that. All right. So next we're going to, well, heat them up. Here we go. So as far as touching them, let's just talk about that. Is it going to come off when you touch it? Not really, but if you were to rub on this before you heat set it, then it would start coming off. All right. So let's just watch the transformation of the wax. Again, just taking that heat tool, you can see already. See how just it's instant. Another cool thing that I like about foundry wax is that you cannot overheat it. You know, if you've ever done embossing powder and you heat embossing powder too long and the embossing powder goes from the powder to a liquid and then soaks into the paper, that won't happen with foundry wax. Look at that. Holy moly. All right, let's take a look at this one. Right now, just kind of a little dusty, but it isn't really. It just looks like it. But now you can see all of that shine. Look at that. Oh, so good. So this is a light application. Remember, this is the one that we did with the brush. And you could go over this and do 2, 3, 4 layers dry brushing until you got whatever intensity you wanted. And we can go back to that. Oh, this one's good. Look at that. Whew. Because that one has mind and statue on it. Man. Yeah, before I heat the rest of that, let me just kind of show you the difference. So can you see that? That shiny metallic. And then you can see here, it's only got heated like right to here. So this, no heat is applied. This, heat has been applied, right? So you could just totally see how the light hits it and how it leafs. That's what it's doing. Because these foundry waxes are made with leafing metallics. They are designed to leaf as soon as heat is applied. And that is the foundriness. You need to essentially melt this down to create, like, look at that. Wow. Oh, so good. It's like, seriously, the camera can't even do it justice. Look at oh wow, look at the flower. It's so quick too. That's the other thing. It's so fast. Like once your heat tool is going and you just pick up your next paper, it's so instant. Okay, now this is one we did a little dry brushing on. So let's just see what happens when the heat is applied. See, look at that. Look at that. Ooh, so pretty. And that is that dry brushing that I almost didn't see. Right. Then this is the one where we added that with our finger. So we're going to see a little bit more of the higher points hit on those leaves. See that? And then we'll heat this one on white. Now we're going to do some other techniques with ink because this is a wax. This wax is also going to be a resist. So it will resist other colors, meaning you can put distress inks or oxides or anything like that. So here on designs like this, it's important to understand that obviously the thicker the wax is applied in areas, you're going to get more of that metallic. The thinner, the less you will get. So could you go back and add more? Always, right? Could you build up layers? Always. It really just depends on the effect that you want. Like this one, really big effect, right? This one, like, look at that. See, you can see it's so much better than, when you first put it on, it wasn't like, well, it's not that exciting. But it is exciting when you heat it up. That's what makes the magic. And like on this one, I went over this one with a couple of layers, right? So you can see the difference. This is the one that I just demoed. This is a second one I did. So instead of really trying to cover everything, I just hit some of the high points. I heat it, And then I went in and did another one and heat it, right? So I added 2 layers of heat because I wanted to try to keep more black in the area and more metallic on the textures. So even how you apply it, right? Because remember, as that stuff starts turning into that, we'll just say the dustiness, it's going to cling to all those other areas and it will still stay there even when you heat it. So if you don't want that, then just brush it on while it's more of a liquid, heat it, apply more liquid, and brush it on again, and then you'll have more black showing up. So here on this one, right, this just shows there's not much of a difference, but this one is done with a brush, right? This one is done using my finger. Not much, right? But this one you can see is a little bit heavier on the letters because, well, you know, pudgy parts, the finger can go in and do that. So it's just a lot of good play. That's just basic embossing. But we're going to talk about stenciling and inking and all sorts of different things. So we will get there. So far, that's just embossed paper. Pretty impressive, works on all different papers, just depends on what you want to do. So for cleaning, if you ever see, and this is what I do, because if I'm ever using wax on there, I'm just going to use water, a dry paper towel, and take off any wax, whether it was just the crumbly parts or the part that I was messing around with my finger. Okay? The other cool thing, and probably one of my most favorite things about Foundry Wax and why it took so long to develop it, because at that point you're like, okay, well that's pretty cool, is metal. In the world of ideology, we have a lot of metals, right? We have so many different metal components, everything from charms even to gears. So creating a product that was specifically designed for metal was our first goal. Paper, of course, was a bonus because it's going to work on paper, it's porous. But what about metal? What about something that would be so permanent that I wouldn't have to worry about taking that off of the metal? That's what Foundry Wax does. Foundry Wax can transform a charm, whether that's brass or any type of base alloy, into a beautiful metallic finish, right? A leaped finish, not something that you would get with alcohol ink or alloys or mixatives, an actual metallic finish. And this doesn't even scratch off. Could you get it off? Yeah, you could probably take steel wool or you could take sandpaper, but my point is, if you were to use this for jewelry, you wouldn't have to do anything to it. It's on there because once we heat it, it becomes a solid that is fused to the surface. Now, different surfaces, of course, are going to work differently. Different metals are even going to work differently. If your metal is completely smooth, well, then when you go and scratch it, it's not going to come off right away, but you have a better chance of wearing it off of a smooth surface than you would something textured, okay? So just keep that in mind. I don't want someone to be like, oh, he said this is indelible. Look, I did this and I did my mailbox with it and it came off. Look, this is for craft purposes. This isn't for, you know, your mailbox or your, you know, your doorknobs or anything like that. It's still craft, but from a wearable aspect, jewelry, or just charms in a journal or a make, you don't have to worry about that color coming off. But the finish is incredible. Like you can see how reflective it is. So let's play around with metals. There's a lot of options. We can go in and do, we can do a butterfly, do that. Bugs, right? Totally love entomology bugs. It could be the heads of brads, right? You could take your brads and stick it like in a piece of cork and then do the tops of all your brads so they're metallic. It could be metal stars, maybe even a frame, right? There's that frame. You could even do a little heart, right? Any of these adornments, right? And they don't have to be silver. They could be any color because Foundry Wax is opaque. It is going to cover whatever you put it on, right? It's not an ink, it is a wax. I'll probably say that a dozen times in here, and that's okay to remember, because anytime something new, it's like, okay, well, that's just weird. It's a wax. So let's go in and add some of those. For metals in particular, if you want to color the metal, a paintbrush is going to be great. The reason is a paintbrush is what's going to allow you to use it in its liquid state. Because if we want to cover something, we really want it to be more like a paint, right? If we only wanted it to be the high points, well then at that matter, we could go in and use our finger and just hit the high points of metal and still heat it. But if you want to color the metal like this completely, I would recommend a brush. This is just the alcohol ink brush. I like this one because it's a synthetic bristle. It's still soft, right? But it's very short. Often short brushes I find are a little bit more rigid, and I like that this one is still very soft because we use it with alcohol ink, so it's totally great with solvent. But the nice thing about this, of course, and you'll see when I apply it to this butterfly, I can apply some foundry wax right to the craft mat with a brush, go in while it's wet, and paint directly on this metal. And when you're painting it, it's going to give complete coverage because at this point it is fluid. Now, let's say you needed to thin it down. I'll get into that later. I don't want to complicate things, but there are some tips of thinning out the viscosity of foundry wax if you wanted to use it for other things, but we'll get there, okay? Baby steps, baby steps. Here's what I have so far. See, the butterfly done, covered. Could you add another layer? Yes. I would always suggest if you're trying to build intensity, heat and then add another one, right? Versus just continuing to go and paint and paint and paint. That's just completely up to you. But I would say that for this, I prefer to layer on metal. And you can see right away, I haven't even heated this one, but you can see the finish it's gonna change. It really is. All right. So I'm gonna change colors. So let's just talk about cleaning the brush. So I have a little isopropyl in a jar. That's how quick it cleans with isopropyl alcohol, right? So just rubbing alcohol and that brush is clean. So that's gonna take all of the metallic, meaning if I didn't want any gold on the next one because maybe I wanted a specific color, I can do that. Let's just take all of these elements and we're just gonna paint all of these, just working right on the mat. We'll do different colors, but we're still gonna paint. Maybe we'll even go in and do a little mixing. So we'll start with some statue. And I think I'll paint this little heart. Actually, no, I think I'm gonna paint the frame. But this one I'm just gonna brush. Kind of you get what you get and you don't throw a fit, right? Meaning if some of that black is under there, even better. So almost like a dry brush, but still wet because we are going on metal. So if you've ever tried to put like a cream on metal, it goes on metal, but it doesn't necessarily cover it. So just keep that in mind. All right, but I'm still gonna work with that. All right. Just wipe off my brush. Let's take another color. Take a little bit of gilded, not much. And then, because these are silver, I'm not really going to use sterling. That's kind of cheating. But I'll show you different ways that we can also distress it, because we can take this metal even to another level, right? So for this one, for these, I'm just going to go in and just do the wings, right? With that brush. So simple, just to do the wings of that cicada right there. Good. And it is a wax, right? So if you continue to build up, depending on the, what you're doing, this one, these are ideology adornments, so they're fairly deeply etched, but you're in good shape. But if you had something that didn't have a lot of detail and you went in with too much of that wax, you could start filling in the detail, but you don't have to worry when it's fluid. So now for this one, right, I'm going to try just to hit the tops of that. So now I'm going to go in with my finger, just trying to get this a little bit more creamy, right? You can see the finger mark, so that tells me, and you can also feel it, but then the viscosity is already starting to change. But now I'm just going to lightly dab just on that decorative part. The other great thing about applying it, say, to metal, for example, if it's on an area that you don't want it to be, and I'll show you that. I'll just accidentally push it there, right? Accidentally on purpose. Let me hold this up, right? If you get foundry wax where you don't want it and you haven't heat set it yet, you can go in with a clean brush, you can go in with a Q-tip, you can go in whatever, and you can take that off. So I'm just using a clean brush, and I wiped off that wax before you heat it. So you do have the ability to remove it before you heat it. But once you heat it, well, it's on there, unless you plan on, again, going, attacking it with some steel wool or something like that. You're really not gonna get that off. All right. So we've got some metal pieces. So now we're going to heat metal. Now, common sense would tell you that when you apply 340 degrees of heat from a heat tool to metal, the metal is going to get hot. Keep that in mind. And I said common sense because your common sense is there when you turn it on, but as soon as you see the magic, common sense goes away. At least it does for me, where I'm like, I want to pick it up, I want to look at it. The metal is going to get hot. So try to avoid touching it. But I'll give you some tips on that as well. Okay, we're going to heat this up. So this isn't something you're going to hold on to. You could use, some people use all sorts of little gadgets, tweezers, clothespins, but I'm just going to work right on the glass, and you could work on either one. Doesn't matter. This This can handle heat. But you can see already that butterfly is starting to transform. I don't want to pick it up and hold it because I can't. But the interesting thing about metal is you have to wait for the metal to heat up, and it doesn't take very long, but it takes a little bit longer than paper because obviously the entire piece of metal needs to reach that melting temp of the wax. Beautiful. And we're going to go into this guy. And by keeping them all together, a lot of times that heat that is deflecting off the side will heat up the other pieces, right? So I can put those even closer. I do love this embossing gun. I like that I kind of feel like I'm pointing where I want to apply that heat. Now, if you don't heat it all the way, how do you know? Well, a couple things. One, the finish won't be nearly as lustrous as it is. But two, if it comes off on your fingers, it just means you didn't heat set it, because foundry wax has to be heat set to transform and leaf onto the surface. All right, there's our little star. We're going out little heart. Very cute. Very cute. All right. So once I think they're done, and I do think they're done, but I want to go in a little deeper on these wings because I did put many, many layers. Oh, so pretty. I'm just going to show you a couple of tricks as far as like working with metal, because I like to do a lot of metal charms at once. You can put some alcohol ink over here. You can put some archival. Vicky shared that. Vicky Evans. Using archival on metal is also really cool for this. I like to use crayons myself. But once this is done and you want to touch it, just get your water bottle. See that like steam coming off? Right? Yeah, you can actually see the steam coming off, right? Just spraying water, because it's wax, guys. It's completely waterproof now, but that cools off the metal really quick. If you're impatient like me, move it out of the way, because obviously glass is also heat conductor, so move it into a cooler area. Now that you can touch it, just mop up the water, right? I can just dab off the water because it's just water, right? It's no color, just the water. But now I can actually touch it just like that, and take a look at that. Holy moly, how beautiful is that, right? That wonderful finish that's just on there. And again, we could build it up. We could go in with a second layer of color. We can do all sorts of cool things with that. So there are just those wings that just have that wonderful little gilded look of gold. Here's our frame. So this, we can go in with some distress paint. We can add a little patina, and you can put this on before or after a medium. I'll talk about that too, because I'm going to work with inks and oxides, just to remind you of, when you're working with a translucent one, what you should do, or something opaque, okay? Because there's so many cool things you can do with the wax once you understand its properties. Even as simple as a cardstock. Like if you wanted, let's say you wanted a gilded edge, right, of a card. Well, you have options. You can either take the foundry wax and run your finger along the edge. You can take the foundry wax and use a blending tool. Or you can take the foundry wax, because it's liquid, drag a line across the craft sheet, and then just take your card and almost use it as a squeegee, right? That's going to build up a really nice line on your paper. So when you start playing around with application, there's no right or wrong way to do it. You're just going to figure out like, oh, hey, for this one, I like to use a brush. For this, I like to rub on with my fingers. Whatever it is that you want to do, you can. But let's say you're a bit more of a grungy person, like me. No surprise there. And you love gears or anything. You could even grunge up your butterflies. I'm going to judge that. But I love how I can take metals and not only change the colors, but grunge the colors, right? I'll show you. Like, take a look at these. Oh, yeah. So this is this, right? Starts out as silver, but now we've gone in and we've added foundry wax to not only create that metallic finish, but also give it a little bit of grunge, right? Because, if you wanted it just to be pretty, it can be pretty. But pretty and grunge, well, that's my sweet spot right there. Little pretty, little grungy. And here's how we do it. Really simple to work with. So I like these specific gears, these industrial gears, because they have texture to them, right? Because they have the little screws and the other layers, and that's where that grunge is going to get in. If this was a smooth piece, you can grunge it a little bit, but it won't grunge nearly as nicely as something textured. So keep that in mind if you are going to try to use foundry wax on metal and you want to grunge it up. So all of these would still work because they have some type of texture to them, okay? So for example, on this particular gear, I say don't you think we should just go in and keep with statue? Why not? I like it. Use what you like, okay? So I'm just going to shake that up. I'm going to apply some. Now I know it's a pretty big gear, but I can always add more if I want. I'm just going to pick this up and just going to paint right on there. You could see, right, it covers really quickly. While it's fluid, you just go for it. So just paint it on as you would paint, but keep in mind it's still a wax, so you don't want to put this in a palette. You don't have unlimited open time to do it, but you do have time to work with it. And the more you apply to your craft mat, meaning as it's fluid, it will stay more fluid longer, right? Because you don't have all that surface of air hitting it. The other thing to keep in mind with a brush is, at first I started brushing it on when it's liquid, but now you can see I'm almost kind of pouncing it because I know it's turning creamy. And if I keep brushing it, it's going to start wiping it off because now it went from a liquid to a cream at this point. But here's what we've got. I'll hold this up. Nice, great coverage. Right. Could you wear some of this off? Sure. If I wanted to just, let's say on these screws, I'll just use my finger. See how you can start wearing some of that off? There's some of that silver coming through. You can. See, it's on my finger. Before you heat it, you can certainly take off any of that finish that you want. I've got a little ice over there, just cleaning the brush. If you get in the habit of doing that when you're done, then when you go to pick up the brush, you know it's clean. All right. Yes, we will get into stencils as well. We will talk about stencils. We will talk about colors and sprays and splatters, just one step at a time. So here we're going to heat this because we do need to heat it. Same trick as before. Apply some heat. And I would imagine if you had like a little, I don't know, little hot plate or something, a little skillet, you could probably set your metal right on there and it would do that. But this is going to certainly do the trick. And you'll just, it's hard to probably see from that area and of course the light hitting it, but you can see it transform. It just goes from a metallic looking to actually looking like metal, if that makes sense. If you've used a metallic paint, it looks metallic, but it doesn't look like metal. This transforms into actual metal. And I don't mind making sure that it's done, especially, go around the little angles, around the little gears or the screw heads or any of that, because you can't overheat this product. That's what I also like. It's better just to be safe than essentially wasting my wax because it's going to come off. So I applied heat. Next, I'm going to cool it. All right. Oh, cool. See? Look at that. A little bit of water. I know. Mario's definitely missing his sound effects now because you'd be all over that, wouldn't you? That'd be so good. All right. Like it's where I want to go. Okay. There we are. Now look at the difference. Like you see how the light just bounces off of it. Okay, so right now, beautiful, right? But we want to add a little grunge because these two are the same color, right? It's the same foundry wax. This one happens to be statue. So as I mentioned, my favorite way to alter this is going to be a crayon. I love Distress crayon because it's pigment, it's matte, it's thick enough to build up in the areas way easier than working with acrylic paint, in my opinion, okay? So a couple of ways we can do it. One, you could color directly on the surface, right? So the crayons, the Distress crayons, kind of have that almost lipstick kind of consistency at first, right? Especially the newer crayons. And you could go in and you can use your fingers and kind of burnish that in. That's one way to do it. The other way, especially on something that has a lot of texture, is I'll take a Distress crayon, scribble it onto the mat, take a blending brush. So this is a Distress blending brush. This one is dedicated to crayon, right? I never clean it. I just use it for brown crayon all the time. Now, crayons are a water reactive pigment. So I'm going to add a little bit of water to that. And that's going to turn it into, see, that yummy, almost like a wash. And now I can just pounce all of that brown sludge into all these areas, right? If you need more brown or, if you get too much water on there, right? I'm going to scribble some crayon. So this is a wet area of my craft mat. See how much crayon is not coming off? This is dry. See the difference? Oh, it's kind of off camera, but you can see. So if you're trying to put crayon on your mat and it's wet, pick a dry area. But now I can take some of that and even pick up, see, it's way thicker now. And then I can I can really build it up into some of those areas. Okay. Now, crayon is not going to be permanent. So if you were going to do something, maybe jewelry, you would have to then maybe apply a spray sealer or something afterwards. But for crafting, for paper craft, for mixed media, you don't have to worry about that. Okay. So here's what we've done. At this point, we put crayon over the whole thing. Well, now we've kind of lost some of the metallic because it's a pigment. It covered up everything. So I'm going to slide this up to cover the bristles, right? That's how this works. Slides up, lid, on, right? So what I need to do is take a paper towel, add just a little bit of water to the paper towel, and I'll just do this closer to camera so you can see. So by just taking a damp paper towel and just touching that, see how you're starting to take off some of that grunge? I'm not wiping it all up, I'm just dabbing it just to reveal some of that metallic wherever I want that to be. Look at that. And once the crayon air dries, it won't just come off on your fingers, right? You would have to wet this because you saw on here, when it's dry, the crayon bonds to a surface, even something slick, right? So you need to let this dry, or use a heat tool. You could dry that on there as well. But then you don't have to worry about it coming off unless you wet it, right? And that's why I say don't lick your artwork, right? If you were to lick it, it would come off. But if you don't wet it, it's going to be totally fine on your make. But how great is that to make foundry wax even more distressed, right? So, so good. Should it be stored out of the sunlight? Yes, it should. You should not keep this in a, because it's a heat activated product, I wouldn't put it in a windowsill or in direct sunlight for sure. But you don't have to worry about keeping it, you know, like I said, in an enclosed, cool, you know, hideaway. Just don't leave it out in the windowsill. But I live in Arizona. I have windows in my studio. The sun is not beaming in on that spot, but there is sunlight in the room and there's no problem with that. Okay. We still wanted to create a product that is user-friendly. Right, so that's it on metal, right? You could see that we can use it just as is. Again, you could go over this with alcohol ink if you wanted to add color over this. You could go in with archivals as well. But if you wanted to add that bit of grunge, crayon is pretty darn cool for that, all right? So next we're going to move on to other substrates. And I'm going to talk about a lot of surfaces because we're going to go into glass, we're going to go into resin, we're going to go into all the wood, everything I said at the very beginning about like go through the demo. And then you'll see, and then if I don't answer the questions, well, feel free to ask them. I'll just keep moving on because I might answer your question just in the demo itself. So next up, we'll talk about resin. Now, resin, this could be a lot of things. This could be resin, this could be clay, this could be plaster, right? Even something like plaster of Paris, or it could even be glass, okay? But each one is going to have a different, just going to say a different variable, if you will, okay? So first we'll just talk about something truly slick, like glass. Foundry wax will melt on glass, but because there is no tooth to glass, if you were to scratch it with your nail, the wax would come off. But if you just touched it, the wax won't come off, right? Once you set it. So I'll show you what I mean by that. These are the mini domes. They're just kind of cool. I don't know if you would want to put this on because it would be opaque, but let's say, I don't know, let's find something that's probably more appropriate for that. Let's say we had a bottle, right? A corked vial, and you wanted like a little bit dipped in gold, okay? Here we go. We can just add a little bit of that. We'll take this and we'll brush it on. Now the thing about brushing it on, right? See how it is on glass? Glass has no tooth, so you can see those brush strokes right away, even from a liquid aspect of glass. Now, you can also see, I'll try to get that to focus, you can also see that that's starting to dry. That's dry on glass. That isn't. So if I went back over this area on the glass, do you see it just took it off? Because now it went from a liquid to a cream. So because this has no tooth, glass is really tricky to get the wax to transfer on. Could you do it? Yes. Could you dip it? Yes. You could also just take some of that wax, take your finger, and you could, quickly dab it around the base of something, right? So see, because I was able to apply it quicker with my finger while it's fluid. See, I was able to get all of that on there. So it's all about understanding the properties of that, the wax itself, because you'd be like, does it work on glass? Well, it would, but of course, if you put that on and you continue to overwork it and now it became a cream, now the cream is going to wipe off the glass. Okay, so let's heat this up. I'm going to just take my brush, put it in a little ISO real quick, just so it can sit there. Oh, I got a little ISO on my fingers. Ooh, it's on the glass. Okay, that's all right. Let's heat this up. Let's see what happens. Okay. The glass is going to get pretty hot, but we'll see if I can handle the heat. There's a little ISO. Look what that did. It ate it away. That was pretty cool. All right. Let's just heat it on the glass. You'll see that the wax, there we go. Can you guys see it? Let's get it to focus. All right. Liquid gold. Oh, so good. Okay. So we'll let that cool for a second. So there's that wax on the glass. We're gonna let it cool for a second. See, like its melting point is super quick, and glass is not like metal, right? Especially this because it's a bottle. It didn't require a significant amount of heat over time to set. But here's what you need to remember about that surface and the fact that it is slick, okay? So when I applied that heat to it, and you saw I just applied heat to it, and the glass, well, there you have it on there. It will melt, right? And it's cool, right? It's cool to the touch. But I'm just going to wait for just a second because I want it to be, could you spray water? Yes, I could spray water. There we go. Just to make sure it's completely cool, just to be totally fair. So as far as touching it, right? So I can touch this. It's okay. It's not going to do anything. But if I start to scratch on it, right? It's going to take a little bit of work to take that off. Like, it doesn't want to come off easy. See, there's not much on my finger, and I'm really going in there trying to scratch it. So could it come off? Yes. It wasn't really meant for glass, but does it work on glass from a decorative aspect? Sure. You just need to know how you're going to work with it and how you're going to apply it. So a little later when I talk about thinning it out, remember this on the glass that, maybe you wanted to dip like, I don't know, the base of a, like a votive holder. Yes, but if you're going to put a flame in there, a candle, you don't have to worry about it because once this is set, it's not going to remelt with heat, right? When you add heat, this doesn't turn it back into a liquid. Once it becomes a solid, it's a solid, right? That's it. That's what it is. So on other substrates like resin, it's really interesting what you can do with it and to it. And you're going to see some other techniques that maybe you've seen before in demos and kind of one-upping a technique. We're going to put a little bit of foundry wax right on that mat. I'm going to spread this out really quick. So see, the more air that hits it, see how it turns into a cream right away? Zippity-doo. That's what I want it to do. And now this is just a store-bought frame, right? Want to add a little bit of that gold to the edge. Need more. Quick shake. And each time I just give it a quick little shake, especially because off camera they're just laying on their side. So when they're on their side, it really is much quicker to just shake up that color. So on this raised area, I'm going in where it's more fluid, right? Because I know that in order for more to transfer, I want it to be fluid. But then now that it's creamy, now I'm going to go around just the outside edge of this frame. Essentially anything that is heat stable, you can try, and you'll see that also. Here we go. Oh yeah, Ideology candles would be beautiful on there, for sure. Metallic candles. We see metallic candles for the holidays, don't we? All right, so look at that. I mean, you can see just how quick that foundry wax, I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, I don't really even know if this light truly captures the magic. How's it looking, Mario? Okay? I mean, my gosh, but it is going to get better. Honest, guys, in this demo, I'll show you. It gets better and better. And I love the fact that, unlike alcohol ink, right? Alcohol ink reacts itself. So if you try to put alcohol ink over alcohol ink background, it starts to re-wet it. This doesn't. Once you've applied heat and it becomes a solid, it is a solid. It is something that's going to remain as a solid. But take a look at that frame now, right? We've got those gilded accents. We can go in with crayon. We could do whatever. But I love that little bit of metallic on a resin frame. What about something like this? I'm just going to clean a little bit off of my finger before I pick up something else because I don't want to cheat. That's what it is. I don't want to act like that. See, a little hand sanitizer is going to take that off. And we'll clean that off of the mat. So if you recall some demos where we talked about resin, we talked about these flowers, and when I was showcasing like how cool using Distress embossing glaze to color resin is, I created some beautiful flowers. So these are the Ideology heirloom roses and heirloom florals. I even did it like in a, remember that cool jewelry box, right? Really pretty, okay. But these are just resin. So these could be buttons. Maybe you had buttons, or maybe you had, maybe you made some of these flowers. But what if we had something that was decorative and we wanted to add just a cool accent to them? Look at that. A cool little metallic accent to those roses, right? Anything heat stable, we can do that. So again, these were done using collage medium, distress embossing glaze. If you want to see the demo on that, I do have a demo on the website. You could probably look up embossing glaze and distress embossing glaze and see. So these have already been done. So these started out as white. The color, the different colors came from using the distress embossing glaze with collage medium. Melt it. Then I went in with brown crayon because we've seen the magic of a walnut stained crayon, right? That's what went in there. But now we're just going to add a little, well, a little gilding, if you will, a little accent. So we can take some of that. We'll just do a little bit of gilded, and I'll even add a little splash of statue to that color. This way it warms that up, almost kind of a rose gold, if you will. Look at that. Just mix up a new color. And then while it's wet, just take my finger and just dab over the top. So I'm just gonna, it's much easier for me just to set it down and dab, and just pick up as many flowers as you want to do. Again, compartmental making. So think about things that you already have. Maybe it's something that is made out of clay. Maybe it's something that you've already cast out of plaster or resin that you want to add, that you want to rub this on. It's completely up to you how you want to apply it and what you want to apply it to. But see how it's like starting to get more creamy, right? It's actually making this want to stick to my finger. That's okay. It's still going to apply. It's just a bit more challenging. But what you can also do, what I like, let's take this bigger one, right? Is you can almost just scrape some of this off onto the edge. You're going to see how that really benefits us when we talk about stenciling, okay? So we can still add it before we go in and heat set. And let's just heat these up. These are going to melt really quick. Done, 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 done. Oh, focus, there we go. Done, done, done. Hand close, away, focused. Mario's like, focus. Look at that, focus. Look at how quick that is. Beautiful, right? I mean, just that finish is so cool. And the fact that we can just put that over the top, and because it is a wax, it didn't go in and do anything with the glaze. It didn't do anything with the alcohol ink. Nothing. So because it's a wax, it's going to sit on something. Resin is your friend. But let's say we wanted to take this on to something else, right? What if we wanted it to be the main feature? Well, that's why I wanted to share that there are things that you might have that you can turn into something absolutely amazing, all right? We'll talk about this. Salvage Santa and Snowman. Nice. Transforming this into this. Something like a vintage silver, like as if it were a chocolate mold or even something foiled. It is so simple to transform it, all right? Here we go. For this one, we're going to use sterling because we're going to make it silver, all right? So I'll shake this up. Yeah, the finish of this, like, honestly, unbelievable. Wow. Yep, it does. It looks like it's leafed. All right, focus. It's the phone. We're going to take this. Now, even though something is a little bit bigger, that's probably, you know, I would say like maybe a nickel size. It's about as much as I want to put on the surface for now. But I'm just going to pick this up and paint it directly onto this Santa. Okay? Move it around. And I'll start from holding the bottom, doing the top, right? Just painting it on. All right. So far, so good. Excellent, excellent. All right. So next, I'm going to add a little bit more. Okay? Shake. He is really cool. But this could be Santa, this could be salvage doll, this could be something that you find, you know, maybe you find like a resin or a plastic, I don't know, rabbit or something, you know, that you want to do for Easter. So here I'm just going to add a second layer because I still see a lot of resin showing, but I'm going to need to build this up. That's the thing you're going to need to remember. I'm going to have to build this up for sure. Okay. So let's talk about viscosity, right? That's what I'm trying to, can you guys see on my brush how it's starting to get thick? And when I'm trying to paint this, right, the viscosity is starting to get a little bit, well, clumpy. There you go. Okay. So what if we wanted the ability to paint? We wanted it to be more fluid. Let's talk about that. I haven't done anything to this yet, right, as far as heat goes, so I can wipe that off because it's already on there. That's not going to change anything, okay? But what you can do, and this is going to come in play in the next thing I share with you, is you have the ability to thin this out. But keep in mind that the more you thin this, okay, the less leafing you're going to get covered, meaning the leafing needs to bond itself. That's what's going to give this reflective nature, right? It's all the, and I'm not a chemist, but he talks about these leafing platelets that actually, when you heat it, they come to the top and they connect, and that's what forms that beautiful kind of mirrored surface. If you thin this out too much, you start breaking that apart and you lose that overall reflectiveness. Not with a little bit, just a lot, okay? So what I'm gonna thin it with is just isopropyl, right? Isopropyl alcohol, don't use blending solution. It's a completely different solvent. Isopropyl is gonna be fine. But if you add too much isopropyl to this, it will break it down, okay? So I'll just kind of show you really what I'm talking about when I add this. So I'll add some of that. We can add just, it's probably maybe 2 or 3 drops of isopropyl, not much, right? But now I can get this a little bit more fluid. You guys see that? It's just much more of a fluid foundry wax that's allowing me to brush it on this easier, okay? It's still covering. That's how you know it's good. And you also don't want to keep going over the same areas. So once I've added to an area, I'm done. But you see, I was able to cover that area much easier by adding a little bit of ISO. All right. So now we're going to heat this. Why? Because I got to hold on to his feet so I can heat it, and then we'll hold on to his head to heat the feet. Here we go. Heat it up. And just make sure you guys can see it. There you go. You can see him just becoming that like silvered magic. Cool. Now, if you have the wax heavy in areas, you might get a little bubbling. That's cool. All right, but don't worry about it. You look at his face already. Can you guys see? Like, it's just mirrored. Oh, so good. Okay. Sizzle, sizzle. Go around the back. Oh, there we go. I got to do that side of his bag. And I'm pointing the heat tool away from my finger, so it's not too bad. Okay. But again, you know, if you wanted to do this and you were sensitive to heat, right? One advice I have is you could always like tape him to the end of a popsicle stick, right? But here's what we have so far. Look at him. Oh my gosh. Already just magical. Just like a silver leafed Santa. But we're not done with him. We're going to keep going in and just adding some other things to this guy. I'm going to go in. Same thing. I'm going to work with this stuff here. I haven't really tried to work it when it's completely dried up, but we'll see. It doesn't appear to be too dry. So again, just a couple of drops of ISO. And now I'm going to work from, I want to make sure my fingers don't have any solvent on there. Just going to mix this up with my brush, right? And we'll paint this on as well. Just kind of mop it on. Again, you need to work, if you're going to paint it on and you need it as the viscosity of a paint, you got to just go for it, right? No Picassos over here. You can't just keep going and adding 3 or 4 layers, because each layer you saw before, it's just going to start removing it. So once you feel you have coverage, right, we can always add another layer after we heat it, but at this point, if we keep going, it's just going to end up taking it off. Okay, this is a little thick, so this is the time that I would have, you know, some embossed paper or whatever, and I would use this to go over something. But, you know, for the sake of the demo, I'm not going to bother. So here's what we can see, maybe a half and half, because I haven't heated one side. So you can clearly see the difference between the foundry wax when you heat it and when you don't. This is the same sterling. Crazy, right? This just looks like gray, but man, when you heat it, it's literally like, well, like foil, like liquid leafing. It's crazy. All right, let's go in and add some heat. So fast. It does not take long. That's the other thing that I think you're going to be pretty surprised about, especially if you are a stamper that's done so much embossing in your crafting days, you know, where you know, like, okay, it's going to take a while to emboss, and then you turn on your heat gun and in seconds you're like, oh boy, it's done. Well, that's it. Oh boy, it's done. So look at that. Woo. Oh my gosh. We have just a silver leafed Santa with foundry wax. But now we have to give him, well, his little touch of grunge, or not. You might just like this and you might be perfectly happy. Some things you can do, you could color over this with Copics, right? Or Sharpie. So you could add a translucent permanent color over the top of that, right? That's a way you could achieve some color on there. You just couldn't tint that because once you heat it, the leafing comes at the top. But you could apply color over this and you don't have to worry about that coming off. But I'm going to go in with my crayon, just like I showed you before. Add a little bit of brown to that, a little bit of water. Take my brush, turn it into a bit of a paste, and then just kind of start pouncing that brown in there. I need to get him pretty, I want him pretty grungy. All right, here we go. Just keep putting that on. So yeah, some people just love the shininess. So for this, I'm pouncing that in. That's what I love about a blending brush. See, it's got that dome to it. And it really allows you to get into all of those areas. Could you go in and color direct and use your finger? Yes, but you apply it so thick that you really lose a lot of detail from Santa. I'm just going to be honest right there. If you try to color and rub it in, it just gets pretty gunky. But hey, you do you. You do what's going to work for you. But I just want to show you some other levels that we can take this. So here's what we've got so far. So now we've applied crayon to the whole thing, and quite honestly, it's dulled it out, right? It's not this. We got to bring back that shine. Remember, crayons are water reactive. So all we need to do, just like when we did the gear, damp paper towel and just start dabbing him on. So see, look at that. It's just instant, guys. I love that, those techniques that just look like you've created something that's so timeless. Just awesome. And there we go. There he is. Done. Could you apply another layer of foundry wax? Yes. Could you add another layer of crayon? Yes. But you don't need to do anything if you like this perfect vintage yum. My gosh. So good. And when I want to like set the crayon on something like this, again, I'll go in with a heat tool and just heat that up. And often when you do that, remember, that's going to bring that foundry wax to the top. I told you, when heat is applied, that leafing will always come to the surface, and that's no different even on the crayon. So you'll see on this one, I applied a little heat to his face. Look at the difference. You see how much shinier it is right there in his beard? So if you want to bring back that shine even after you've done crayon, you could apply heat to get more mirrored shine than a dingy shine. See just the difference in his beard and kind of right there on his coat? Right? So there's no right or wrong. You can keep playing with this, but these are, I mean, it's done. It's on there. They're great little, so cool.
It reminds me of your candy molds.
They totally remind me of candy molds.
Really, I just like it.
Yeah, I just love it. So really, when you're looking at things, again, at the craft store, the dollar store, vintage shops, and you see like little plastic things, you're like, could I apply heat to that for a few seconds? Oh, probably so. Hey, look how you can transform that. It's such a great way to transform things. And that's why I wanted to do foundry wax. I wanted something that would not only work on paper, because we love that finish, but also be very user-friendly on a lot of other substrates. So let's talk about wood, right? Wood is interesting because wood is porous. And I would think that this wax wouldn't work on porous, but it does because it's not an ink. And I think that was my hesitation. Anytime I've tried to use ink on wood, it just soaks in and doesn't do anything. But because foundry wax, well, it is in fact a wax, it allows me to go over a surface and dry brush a surface. So these are just regular frames. It could have stayed that way. So the paint didn't prime anything. The paint is just acting as a colorant. Okay, so keep in mind that you could still do this on raw wood if you wanted to, right? So I'll just shake up some wax. Put some of this down. Again, I just like playing around with color mixes because it's just fun to do, but you know, you want to stick with it, go for it. So here you can see I got quite a bit going. I'm just going to start on the dots because that's the highest point. So you can see that that quickly covers it because this is more in the fluid state. And then I'll start getting into the other details. But the other details, I don't want it to be as fluid because if it is, well, then I'm not going to get that little skippity bit that you would get from a wax. So now once you start seeing your fingerprints in there, you know it's turning into a different viscosity. And now we can go in along the wood and see what I mean about that skippity bit where you're getting that, almost that dry brush look. So we can just put that right around the outside edge. Working with that, and I'll even do some on the inside. You know, again, as long as there's some sort of viscosity. But remember, if you wanted to, you know, let's say you had some down and you were only halfway through, could you add a little bit of a couple drops of isopropyl? You could, right? You could add some isopropyl before it's dried up. But once it dries up to that solid, isopropyl is not going to bring it back because this really isn't the solvent that's in Foundry wax, but it is one that will extend it. If you think about it more of as an extender, not a rejuvenator, right? It can extend the open time, but once this turns into a solid, this isn't going to connect everything back together. Keep in mind. So there's our frame. Not impressive right now, but it will be as soon as we add some heat to it. Okay. Yes, I did. I just used some black distress paint, but it could be any acrylic paint. It's nothing to do with the paint itself. So that's something to keep in mind, right? There's nothing special about a distress paint for this particular technique. So it could be any acrylic paint, it could be gesso, it could honestly be whatever you have that you want to base coat. And it could be any color you want. So now we're going to go on wood. Okay. So I'll just try to hold this close because wood's not going to conduct heat. Do you see how quick that changed? Okay. That's changed, this is not changed. So you can just watch as you go. It's so instant, so fast. It just doesn't even, it's so cool to see every single time when you do it. Never tired, especially if you're one of those, like me, I've been stamping for a bazillion years, and every single time I see embossing powder melt, it's still fascinating to me. So now I want to do the outside edge, right? And you can see because Foundry wax is not a wet ink, I can still handle it even before I added heat to it. It's not going to come off on my fingers, but if you were to, you know, start wiping it off with your fingers, it would. There we are. And really, don't be afraid to just kind of give it that second or third pass just to make sure that every little angle has been leafed, because that's really what the heat is doing. The heat is leafing the metallic in that wax. There we go. Look at that. Too bad there won't be a rose gold, but there was. Sarah, I just showed you how to make one, right? Gold, rose, mix, rose gold, right? Or you can take sterling and mix it with mine and get a lighter rose gold. So when in the metallic world, you're pretty good on that. Turquoise, well, that's a whole thing. You're right, there wouldn't be a turquoise. But rose gold, you can definitely achieve, just like you can achieve a platinum, right? Yep, there you go. Look at that frame. Beautiful. Absolutely love that. And so when I was playing around, because I wanted to play around with different surfaces, right? So it was wood and it was resin, and I was playing around with these guys and I was playing around with metal. I just got silly and just went into my creative space. I'm like, okay, well, this is absolutely silly, and that's what I really like. So I wonder if blending solution would bring anything it would bring a disaster to the table. Blending solution doesn't do anything. It's a different solvent, and it will actually break it down. But you could try it. You might discover something amazing. But blending solution will actually break down the leafing metals and tarnish them in the wax. But hey, maybe that's something cool, right? So here, just a little plastic toy frog, right? Because I wanted to see, what if, could I? Absolutely I could, right? Look at that little prince, right? Just started out as a plastic frog, painted on some Foundry wax, heat it, because I wanted to see, well, what if? I've not tried it on a plastic toy, but that would certainly be a funny thing to do. So is that realistic? No. But is it funny? Yes, because that is me, the brain of a 5-year-old going, ooh, could I do that? Yes, because you could add heat to this. And even though it's plastic, right, you don't have to heat it long enough to actually do that. So that's really what I liked as far as multi-surface. So far, we've covered the basics, we've covered embossing, and we've covered surfaces. So now let's talk about how we put this together with inks. You know, how do we really use it in, say, a more of a creative application as far as a technique goes, and not just as a top layer. But keep in mind that Foundry Wax is designed as that. It's designed as an accent. It's not designed to be a metallic paint, right? That's why it's not sold in a big tub of it. It's more of an accent. But if it's something small, like a charm or toy frog, then yeah, it doesn't take much to actually color it, right? That makes it really, really simple. But what if we wanted to add some things to our backgrounds? Well, we're gonna play around. So first thing we'll talk about is using it with backgrounds. What if we had a card or something that was colored, or something that we did art on, right? How could we utilize this? Well, we can utilize it in some cool ways. So let me just get to look for a background. There we go. Put them over here. Okay. So I'll start with, just want to make sure. There we go. I'll start with a background. This has just been embossed with a mini 3D folder. And we're going to add some color, because you saw before where I just rubbed it over the rose. But one of the cool things that I love to do with Foundry Wax, which I think is cool, and Vicky, one of the makers, we were sharing little tips that we were doing, and she actually like out-tipped me. She has like 8 things that I didn't even try. But this is one of those things that I love to splatter everything. So she's like, have you done a splatter brush? I'm like, oh yeah. I mean, this thing, it's just really a cool way to add wax. Now, when we're using wax, because of its viscosity, I was not successful doing the whole tappity tap with a paintbrush that you might see people do when it comes to splattering. So I am using a Distress splatter brush because it's that plastic that is going to literally like flick this thicker medium off. But here's what I love, that when you look at this, you don't really notice anything. But when the light hits it just right, you see those little metallic sparkles, almost like stardust, pixie dust, fireflies. Like, that's what I love about Foundry Wax over a background, is that you can look at it and it doesn't overpower it. But man, when the light hits it, not only do we get that beautiful reflection, but we get the texture of wax. I mean, you can actually see that the drops are sitting on the surface. It's also nice because of its viscosity, you don't get big blasts like you would paint, right? So this means you can do these splatters over a galaxy background, over an inked background, just over cardstock. But I wanted to show you how easy it is just to add some color. So I start with a mini folder. Okay, I'm going to work over on this side. For this one, I'm going to need a paintbrush. Let's see. All right, I'll just use just a regular paintbrush. This is also one of those brushes that are in the kit, the alcohol ink kit. And I'm going to use some liquid colorant. So I'll do what I did on this one, just to show you the colors I used. I think I'll use a little crushed, and I'll do a little salvage patina. Okay. So can you do this technique with watercolor? Yes. Distress pads? Yes. Minis? Yes. Reinkers? Yes. Any colorant that you want to use, the answer is yes. But for me, if I want something really quick and fluid for watercolor, what's better than a start out fluid, right? That makes it easy. So I'm just taking some Distress spray stain and I'm spraying it on craft mat right here just to add some color, and we'll watercolor. So watercolor, water and color. But in order to get the color to flow, because I love that kind of organic bleed, if you will, I'm just going to start by adding some water to that. I'm also going to add some water right here to the craft mat so I can, put my brush in it to get it extra wet. And I'm just going to pick up those colors and just go right on to that watercolor. So this has been embossed with Distress watercolor cardstock, right? And just get that kind of fluid motion. Okay. If you're happy with the way something is looking, you can always go in with the heat tool for just a second. That's going to help build up some of that saturation. Then I'm just going to use that water to rinse my brush, because I actually want like mucky water. Can you see here that I've created mucky water? I just like that because I want the colors to stay a little on the mucky side. And then again, just taking that brush, I'm going to follow the emboss, but I'm not really worrying about where it starts to bleed out. So don't freak your freak. If If you like to control, so, some people when they're watercolor, they really want to keep the control. Well, then this is not the way to do it. Do it the way that you probably have controlled that situation in the past, which is maybe, starting with less water, or maybe you're using, watercolor instead of spray stains to do it. But again, I like the wickingness of the color. Now, once I have color down, right, if I want it to wick even more, which I do, I can then spray a little bit more water, right? That's going to get those stains to start wicking out from where I applied them. Pretty simple. Again, a little bit of heat tool. I'm not drying anything complete at all. I'm just setting some of that. We'll go back in, rinse some of that off. Okay. Now for this one, I want to make sure that I don't have too much green, so I'll just spray direct on there.
Paul is impressed. You're painting on camera.
I know, right? See? Yeah, but of course my painting is definitely mucky. But I like this. I like this kind of painting because I don't have to worry about staining the lines, right? So here we're going to do a little salvage patina. I'm going to just fill in the blanks a little bit here or there. And I know as soon as like one color touches another color, I'm going to get some of that, right? Get some of that pink in with that blue. That's going to turn a little purpley because my paper at this point is still wet. All right, good deal. Pick up again a little bit more of this. I love saltwater taffy. Oh my gosh, saltwater taffy is such a great color, especially if you combine it. This is a little saltwater and kitsch flamingo, right? So it's just creating just a beautiful, beautiful shade. Okay, gonna start drying this now. Now as I'm drying this, right, there's my color. I still want to keep things moving a little bit. So now I've got heat tool in one hand, not an embossing gun because I don't want my inks to blow anywhere. But then I'm just going to start splattering a little water. The nice thing about the Distress sprayer, you can mist it, but you can also like create that little splattering. So that's really what I'm doing. And you'll see as that's hitting the background, it's just changing the texture, I guess, if you will, of the watercolor. We'll see, right? Really, really simple. So yeah, you kind of have to do, yep, little double fist here, but that's where the heat tool is more important than an embossing gun. An embossing gun is just gonna, it's gonna make everything look like spin art. It's gonna blow that color everywhere. And this just allows me to really focus water to bleed out some color, soften some color. And when I see little pockets of sludge, right? So you can see here that little pocket that's happening. You just take a paper towel and just touch the edge, and that's gonna wick off a lot of that sludge in there. If you want to lighten some color, you can also go in and just dab some of that color off. And we're just drying it. That's all. So far so good. Now I'm done with the coloring. So same paper towel I'm just going to use to get rid of the color. That's why I like working on the craft mat for this. And I'll just again take a clean part, just dab. I'll pick this up, dry this, because if you sprayed your glass with water, it's going to stay wet for a while. So if you're trying to dry something, you also have to dry that. Now I can pick this up and allow the heat to go through it. Allowing heat to go through paper dries it in half the time than if it was sitting flat. Okay? Really simple. I can flip this over because the heat's going through my paper. So now my paper, see, it's getting nice and crispy. That's what we want to go with. All right. Perfect. Okay, so far so good. So here's what we have. Doesn't look like this yet, but you can see simple coloring, but I love that like wicking bloomness. Now, if you didn't want something so intense, well, then don't use intense colors, right? Don't use crushed olive. It's going to be intense. Maybe use, shabby shutters or bundled sage, or of course you can add more water, but you need to make sure this is dry, right? So it should be a little flicky, right? And it should feel dry. If it feels wet, then it's still wet. So we want to make sure that it's dry. We're going to take our ink pad. We'll take a Distress ink pad and just a blending tool. Okay, I'm just going to pick up some of that ink, and I'll start just on the edges to start using the freshest part of ink. And then I'm just going to use that domed foam and hit the high points of that texture. Okay. I don't start there because I don't want all the brown to essentially go on the flower. So I'll start by the edge. And you'll also see that when I'm blending, like you don't have to be a contortionist and go around the paper. Find a comfortable spot where you blend, especially if you work on the glass. That's what I love about the media mat. It's just a nice glass. But here, this is my comfortable spot, right? And I'm able to hold that tool from the base, right? That's also comfortable. My hand can rest here. But all I'm doing is I'm blending and moving the paper, right? Then the paper, if I'm like, oh, I want more there, then I just kind of make that paper go back and forth like that. If I want to go on this side, just spin the paper around. You don't have to be the contortionist going, oh, I want ink over here, because your hand isn't going to have that same motion, and chances are you're going to take, you know, ink and you're going to rub it across something that you don't want it to be on. So once you find that space, your paper can rotate, and that allows you to control so much easier the amount of color or grunge that you're getting. The other benefit to glass is that it doesn't grab any of your medium. So anything that's still on that blending tool, your ink goes so much further on glass than it does inking here, right? If you ink on a craft sheet all the time, that weave of the craft sheet holds a lot of your ink, but glass does not. So here's what we have so far, right? It's getting there. But now I see a lot of smoothness, and I don't necessarily want a lot of smoothness. So to break up the smoothness, I'm going to go back to that water. Again, just those little splatters, right? And the splatters are going just right over everything. Big drips. I'll hold this up before I dry it, but you can see those big drips on there. See that? So what that's going to do is that's going to start breaking up the blend, if you will. And you can tip this up. So if you want drippage, right, we can add some water, give it a little tap, and you can even get some of that water to streak that brown down, right? Look how grungy that is. Nice, nice. And then we're going to go in and dry it. Okay. That's the beauty of Distress. It is water reactive, and I don't use that term lightly. Water reactive meaning it's only going to intensify the color. It's not going to thin out the color. It's going to intensify. So that's why when you add water to stain, and you're like, okay, it was already fluid and now you just added water, but the color's still bright, because the stain is also reactive with water, right? This isn't just a watered down re-inker. This is a fluid ink that is only going to become more dynamic when you add water to it. All right, so now we found, look at that. Look, just that little bit of ink really changes the whole tone of that. It could be any kind of color. If you're not into the grunge, well then don't use gathered twigs. Maybe you want to use something lighter like frayed burlap or pumice stone or maybe antique linen, or maybe you have a color that is a little lighter that you like to work with, right? You just need to use what's going to be more comfortable for you as far as a tonal value. But now we're going to do, well, that. The magic, the splatters. So here we go. We want to make sure this is dry. Again, sound, touch, dry. Now, if you want to create these little edges, here's a couple of tricks. One, you can use a paper distresser, right? I have a paper distresser from Tonic from years ago. You can use the edge of your scissor. But another cool thing is if you have, I'm going to see if I can make a mess of this, but you'll see, because you're not going to be able to see it if I don't hold up. But if you work on a media mat, there's so many times that I will take my paper. Oh my gosh, this is going to be like coin dozer. This stuff is going to fall off the back here. Let me move this out of the way. Okay. So imagine this is the edge of your table, right? This is the edge of my glass mat. Can you see it? Okay, so this sits kind of at the edge of the table. I often take my paper and right there on the edge of that glass, because it's tempered glass, it's not sharp, but it has enough of an edge that I can really go in with the paper and kind of go back and forth, and look at that cool distressed edge. It really does something different than a paper distresser. To me, it actually kind of curls the paper. So you just drag it along the edge of that. And so if your media mat is just sitting on your table, you don't have to hold your media mat up like this. That's obviously just so you can see what I'm doing. But this would be right at the edge of my work surface, and I always just take my paper and I'll just go right on the edge of that. You know, sometimes I even hold both sides and just like like a saw, really. But I just think it gives that paper just the perfect little vintage charm without shredding it up. Right? A paper distresser is going to shred it up. This creates a little bit more of a curl. So just a tip, if you like a little bit of distress, but maybe you're not full into the chop meat of it all, you can just use the edge of a glass mat. It works really, really good for that. Okay? So next we're going to take our splat box, because I'm going to be splattering. I want to make sure that I've got that. We're going to take our paper towel, going to place this down, right? Take our background. So I'll use some gold. So because I want to splatter this, regardless of any of the colors, I like to thin this out a little bit. I really do. It makes you love your glass mat even more. Well, thanks, Lorraine. I love it. I use it all the time. And people are like, is that a paper distresser? I'm like, it could be, But a paper distresser just kind of, it gives a different look. I love my paper distresser, don't get me wrong, but sometimes I just want a little softer roll, and the glass does a cool thing. All right, so I'm going to shake this up. I'm going to apply a pretty okay amount because I obviously need to splatter it, but I need to thin this out. So no matter what color I use, I always thin it out if I'm going to splatter it, right? It just doesn't, I found that if you do that, you just don't have enough time to actually get that to do what it needs to do, okay? So I'm just going to load up the brush. We're going to grab from the back and we're going to release it. So I'm just looking at my surface right now, right? And I know already I'm going to want more, definitely more. All right, so I'll put some of this down. I think, oh yeah, I should have enough ISO. You'll know if you need to add more. You don't always have to. See, there's still some down there. As long as I can move it around, there we go. Yeah, I just needed to get a little closer. I think that time of, just that little time of showing, you know, how close it needs to be to the camera, that's all it takes for that wax to just change, right? Now, the thinner it is, the bigger those drips are going to be, but I'll show you before I heat this up. I'm kind of focusing, so let's just say in this area I really want to focus it, or down here I really want to focus it. You can splatter on a lot of things. I'll even take, we'll see if there's any wax, fluid wax on this.
What you just thinned with?
Isopropyl alcohol, the same thing I've been thinning it with on the previous ones, like when you're painting the Santa, and it's just a couple of drops of isopropyl, not blending solution, because this is a wax, foundry wax. So this is actually a cleaner. That's what I was cleaning my brush with, also isopropyl. So think of it as like, well, like an extender, really. So too much of it would just clean it up, eat it up. But a couple of drops I found is just enough, and you'll see here just on that black, just enough to extend it. Because what I want you to see is how tiny the splatters are. That's what I really like. How tiny? That tiny. Because they're super small, because it's a wax, right? That's what I love about the splatter with foundry wax, because you could be like, well, hello, Captain Obvious. I would do this with paint. I've been there, done that. You've shown us that. Yes, and you can splatter with paint. You can splatter with ink. But splattering with foundry wax is just different. I just cleaned this in isopropyl. Just dipped it in there. Completely safe to use it with isopropyl, but see, it just takes it right off. It's kind of like spaghetti, right? They're plastic. They're thick plastic things. And then we'll take this off. So now we need to apply heat. That's what's going to do the wow, because at this point, even when you look at the splatters, it doesn't look like the other one because we haven't done anything to the foundry wax. Now we're going to take this. I'll see if I can try to capture it, because it's very cool when it changes. It's almost like turning on, let me just get the light to hit it. There we go. So see, almost like, see how those little things almost just light up? Oh, so cool. So there's this one. Look at that. See? Now you can just see those little, just those beautiful little splatters. And you could go on with more. Maybe it'll catch it. I can see it clear as day, but I know in the camera it's just weird seeing that metallic change. There you go. Now you can see it light up. It's like all those little stars just light up. So beautiful. Look at that. Wow. 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 I do that a lot. Wow. 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 Yeah. Beautiful, right? So cool. So splattering, I mean, I think when it comes to splattering a surface, it's really fun to be able to add that effect. But again, just know those other tricks, right? It's important to say, okay, I need it thin enough. Okay, remember, just a couple drops of ISO. Oh, I'm putting it on and it's dissolving. Well, you have too much isopropyl, right? So don't use this as leverage all the time. It's just for certain things when you need that viscosity to be a little thinner, you can add a couple of those drips. But I think that, yeah, it does add a really cool effect to your backgrounds. So now let's play around with, what if we want to utilize it different? Meaning, what if we want to use it with other mediums, other papers? Well, it's a great accent. It's a great accent over oxide. Look at that, over oxide spray. That's just on craft paper. It gives such a beautiful richness. right? Same thing. This is a piece of paper. This is an impresslet. Again, craft paper, oxide, because craft paper and oxide is just a creamy, dreamy meld. This one is spray stain on watercolor paper, right? Totally different look. So let's play around with that and how we can achieve it. And we're also going to just talk about some other elements, right? So remember this technique, right, where we did the coloring, the painting with powders. If you haven't seen this technique, it's a cool technique to see. I've shared it in several videos, but this is painting with embossing glaze. That's what gives us the color, and we do the brown crayon. But the nice thing about foundry wax, and you've got to remember that foundry wax is just going to open up so many different doors to your making style, what you can do with it, right? That you can apply it to something that you have already embossed, crayon, and you just want to take it up a notch, right? You want to add just that little bit of shimmer, just like we did on those resin roses, right? So if I wanted to add some metallic, and I'll add it to this one. This one is painted with glaze. This one also painted with glaze. But what if we wanted to add just a little bit of gilding to it? So for this one, I think I'll do statue and one I'll do gilded, right? So same thing, just going to add a little shakety shake, a little bit of that. I'm just going to pick this up and just going to go around the edges of this, right, on those flowers. I can always wipe it off, and I'll show you little tricks on that too. Hey, Mari, would you grab me a Q-tip real quick?
Sure.
Thanks. Because I can show you, like, that's another way, especially on something that's a little bit bolder like this heart. Thanks. All right. So I'm just dabbing, at this point, just dabbing it on, right? So it started kind of fluid, dabbing it just to create that effect. But you can see by doing that, pudge parts, fingers, right? I've also got it on the heart. You can leave it there if you want, but you can also just take a Q-tip, just dry, right? And take it off, because the foundry wax, liquid, cream, and then once that air hits it, just completely can turn into dust. Nothing has happened to it until we heat it. There we go. Just wanted to build a little bit more so we can make it really dramatic around there. All right. And before I heat that, let's do the same to the butterfly. Okay. Perfect. Add a little bit of that. This one is statue. Again, just going to go into that like fluidness. This one I want to hit a little bit more. Right? So I'm going to work with this right from it just being a little wetter. Okay, there we go. And I'm just going to do one side just so you can see the difference that it makes, because, you know, sometimes you see something and you think, oh, I don't think it looks any different until you see the other side. So now that it's getting more of that kind of cream consistency, now I'm going to push some of that into that flat area as well. All right, let's heat it up. So why is this so important? What makes it important is that I'm able to put it on something that's been embossed with embossing powder. And usually if you try to put something on embossing powder, the embossing powder remelts, right? That wouldn't be good. So what we want to do instead is just take that heat tool, and it's literally, you're just watching it, but it just turns instant. Like, can you see those flowers? It does. It's an instant thing, because it's not the same amount of heat. So my embossing powder is never remelting. I'll just do the same thing on this one. Maybe you can see it from a distance. It's so fast. It's instant. So take a look at that, right? Look at that gold on the outside. So beautiful. It's on there. Take a look at this butterfly, right? Here's the side that doesn't have any foundry wax. Here's the side that has foundry wax. And you can see just that beautiful shine, how it goes right over that color, but it didn't remelt anything. It didn't do anything to the crayon, to any of that. So the question is, do you always have to use it as a top coat? Because it's a wax. Is it really a wax? Yes, it's really a wax. That just made me laugh. So it's a liquid wax. It definitely is. It is made with wax. It's not just a name. So for paper, what if we wanted to apply it first, right? What if we, we're doing that compartmental making. What if we wanted to take this and add that and then add our inks later? Because it's a wax, wax should resist ink, right? Yes, and it does. So what we can do is, and I'll do some with a brush, I'll do some with my finger, because I know that, you know, it's just a habit of doing this, but I don't want you to, that crushed olive just gets everywhere, doesn't it? So here, just going to start, again, a little fluid, because I want it to be quite heavy on the edges of the wings as I bring that in. But you're probably going to find all sorts of, you know, maybe cool tools that you have in your workspace, right? That you might want to use, right? That you can say, oh, I'm going to try this with a, you know, maybe you have some type of brush. Maybe it's going to be a fan brush, or maybe it's going to be a silicone brush. It's going to be all sorts of things. So there's definitely ways that I add a little heavy here. So I'm just going to go heavy down there. Pudge parts, push it in. There you go. All right. There's that. Haven't done any heating to it yet, but we will. Let's do the same over here. Not even going to clean my fingers. So, so cool. Beautiful. Just adding some of this again to that craft paper. So again, how you, I guess, aerate it, is that a way to describe what I'm doing? So see how like I'm making like larger swoops, I guess? That's putting more air onto this, and it's thickening up the foundry wax much quicker, right? It's really turning it into that cream much quicker, okay? But now I'm just going to dab some on the bottom here and on the edges, because you don't always have to do it super light. Now we'll go in with the brush, and we'll do a couple of them with the brush, all right? Just take a little bit of, I gotta get some sanitizer and clean off my hands a little bit. What was the heart impresslet? The heart impresslet was called Lucky Love, and the heart impresslet comes with a clover, right? Beautiful. I love the clover. That's one of my favorites too. I think I actually did one. Yeah, I have one in here. That'd be nice to do a little bit of gold around the edge. Let's do that. There's a clover that we did. That was just watercolor paper. I think that's peeled paint glaze, right? So I'm just gonna, again, go in with a little sanitizer. Just clean up. Yeah, sadly the impresslets, all of my Sizzix impresslets have been discontinued. All of them. So if you see them out there and you're interested, you should get them before they're gone, because once they're gone, they're not coming back, and there are no more impresslets, at least not from me, not coming from me, in the future. So yeah, I really like them. I like them a lot. Okay. All right, so we have those. Let's do a little brushing, right? We'll do one on there. We'll take some, let's take some Mind. That'll be pretty. Nice. We'll do that. Again, take our brush and pick some of that up, and just do some dry brushing, right? Dry brushing, like once you find the right brush that you get along with, and that's all I can tell you, like it has to be one that you get along with. Because everybody has, if you've ever seen people do dry brushing, like everybody has their own kind of knack, but it's really, I think, how they get along with that tool. Because I've seen stuff, I'm like, oh, cool, and then I go and buy that brush, I'm like, oh, I can't even get it to work. It's one that you find that you can get along with. That's my thing. I love impresslets, yeah. No, Sizzix decided to retire all of mine, and that's their decision. All right, just gonna keep adding another layer to this, again, because it's paper. So now you can see that this time I'm just going in from the edges with my brush, because that's applying more wax from the outside going in. Does that make sense? All right, there you go. So see, like, and to me, like, you definitely get more control with a brush than you do with your finger, but it also, from a gilding aspect, right, that whole leafing look, I tend to like that, right? Okay, again, just cleaning my brush in isopropyl. All right, now let's heat these up, and then we're gonna add some ink to them. Okay. So next I'm just gonna add a little bit of heat. Look at that. Can you see that change? I'm trying to get it to where the light will show you as soon, the moment it turns. Oh, there you go. That did it. Because it is quite instantaneous. It's so crazy. And it doesn't stay molten or liquid, so you can touch it right away. I mean, it cools, like especially on paper, it's going to cool in seconds. Okay? Just trying to get the best angle. Let's see if this works. I'm trying to look to my phone to see if that shows on the camera. Woo-wee. at that with the dry brush. See that little bit of mine? Haven't done this side yet. See, this side is all reflective. This side is still brown. Try to do it. Once you see it in real life, and I think the makers would agree, because even when the makers saw the demo, you know, they were excited about that, but I think when they got their hands on it and actually did it, and you get to see it just transform right before your eyes, it's pretty amazing. Oh, look at that one. Whoa. Okay. So the reason I did this one first is just to show you that you could do it first. Now, as a maker, if I'm going to use foundry wax, I plan on always using it as an accent, right? To me, that's something that I'm not going to like do this. I'm not going to pre-plan and go, oh, I already know I'm going to want this gilded, so I'm going to do that. I would normally do all my inking or, you know, my embossing, whatever the technique is, and then use foundry wax as the accent. That's what it was designed for. So honestly, that's how I would always use it. But I still needed to answer the question where people say, well, if it's a wax, then does it resist? So the answer is yes, but I wanted you to see it firsthand. So that's why I'm doing it this way, just to be completely clear of why. All right. So here I'm just going to add some colors. Again, just adding some spray stain. Beautiful colors, beautiful colors. Let's do a little antique linen wouldn't be bad. There we go. And I think I'm going to do a little saltwater taffy too. Okay. Not too bad. So at this point, I want to dry my ink. I always switch to a heat tool to dry just because that's what I like to do, right? That's what I like to do. But you will see, and I'll hold it up in just a second as soon as I take it away from the inky pool that it's sitting in. I want to set some of this ink, but you'll see that the wax, in fact, still rises to the top. It still resists. But like with anything that you use a resist for, when you put a fluid over the top, you're still going to want to go in and dab off some of that color. Okay, and I'll show you what I mean. I'm actually leaving some right there just so you can see specifically what I mean by that. All right, let me just take some of that sludgy color out of there. I want those wings to be a little bit lighter. It's not totally dry yet. There we go. Gives me the option. This, clean up. Now, of course, yeah, you could put whatever you want in there. You know, a journal page, a card, a background. Just cleaning that with water. But normally I'd be doing a lot more inking of other things. Okay, so here's what we have. So you can still see that the wax is there, but I don't know if the camera's going to pick it up. There's tiny little dots of color. Not a lot, but enough, because when you spray it on, it's still going to sit on the top of it, right? So I'm just going to go in with just a little damp paper towel and just touch that over the top, just to take off any of those little speckly, fleckly bits of ink that would sit on top of the wax. That's all that you can see. They're tiny little droplets, because that's what would be sitting on top of the foundry wax. There you go. So yes, you can add your color at any time. We could even go in and continue to add it. The wax will always work as a resist. So if I wanted to add a little bit more salvage patina in there, and maybe I wanted to go in and intensify that with a little bit more saltwater taffy, every single time you apply it, the wax will forever be a resist. But again, that's what I like about using it as a top layer, because I would already know what color is under there, and I would already know how much wax I would want to put in a specific area. But again, that's how I do it. You do you. But if you wanted to have your pieces ready, you'll do it. And I'm going to do one with oxide to show you, because oxide, there are just a different parameter involved, because oxide is not just a dye. It actually has some pigment in it. Okay, it's a fusion of dye and pigment. So this one, I'm drying all the way. I'm cooking that color in there. That's where it's getting bright too. If you want your papers to have more color, then you need to make sure that you leave the color in the paper, right? So many times people put a lot of color down, be that ink pad or spray, and then they go in with a paper towel or an inky binky and they dab it all off, and they're like, oh, the color's not intense. Well, the color's not intense because you just sucked it all out from the paper towel. Look at that one. Beautiful. But in my world, pure happiness happens when there's a little bit of brown that comes in. So I'm going to go in with the blending tool, right? Add a little bit of brown around the edges, right? So same thing, comfortable spot. Paper's turning. I'm not doing this. I'm not inking into my hand, right? You're holding this is no different. And just move that piece around, because you already have that rhythm. You already know how you can turn that ink tool. So different when you just find that comfortable spot for inking. You just get to control it so much more. Keep going around, but look at the difference of that. See how that just frames? Wow, 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 wow. Okay, so now we'll do this one, and we're going to use oxide. Now, anytime I use oxide spray, I'm going to say I just use a splat box. I don't do it so much with the spray stain, although you probably could. But oxide, it has a mind of its own, and because it's a dye and a pigment, it tends to kind of float a little further, and I don't really like that. So I'm just going to give these have to have a quick little shake, not too much, and we'll go in and add some of that. A little salt water. There we go. And a little squeeze lemonade. Squeeze lemonade's nice. Just do a little bit. Then I'm going to add more color over the top before I dry it. All right. So essentially it's just like a pink, a blue, a yellow, but in there I actually got green and orange because everything's wet, right? So it gives you the ability to go in and do that. And we're going to dry it. Take it out of the box so you can see it. Woo-wee, look how beautiful that is. Oh yeah. So squeeze lemonade, saltwater taffy, and yes, the magic of salvage patina. It's like spring in a bottle, isn't it? Look at that. Delicious. Okay, again, using a heat tool, I want to keep the color in there, so I'm keeping the color. There we go. But oxides are going to oxidize, right? So I'm just going to add a little mist of water because I want to get that oxidation, not just the colorant. Oxides will only oxidize when you add some water to them. Other than that, they're just the pigment. So just that little mist definitely gives me that creamy, dreamy look. All right. So let me just pick this up real quick and show you. So right now, it's beautiful, okay? But right now the oxide went over the wax, okay? So you can still see the shine. It's definitely there. But just like the other one with the spray stain, just a damp paper towel, when I wipe over this and I just wipe off that little bit of oxide that was sprayed over the foundry, because I applied the wax first, right? Now you'll see that the metallic is just more luminous, right? See the difference? So wiping off just that little bit over the top, whether you're using oxide or spray stain, definitely brings out that luminous factor. But could you go in and add another layer of wax? Absolutely. You know, could you go in and now ink the edges with Distress ink even though we did oxide? Well, absolutely, right? Does it have to be brown? In here, absolutely. But in your world, no, it could be whatever you want it to be, right? But see, just framing the edge of something with another color, a darker color, it brings your eye more into the beauty of what that is. But let's just add another layer of wax because we can, right? Let's see the difference. Here's kind of, I can't show you before and after unless you just grab it. So there's before. It's pretty, right? But there is something about adding foundry wax as a top layer. Again, taking a little bit of that, just working it in with my finger a little bit so I can see my fingerprints, because to me that's like it's like the perfect texture that I like when I'm applying it to paper. But then it's go time. Then you have to just go. You really don't have, like, once it turns into that texture, that means it's really starting to kind of solidify there. So, and I can tell when I'm putting that next layer on that it is going to do something, because that wax kind of covers up most of the shine that's there. But let's heat it up and see if we need to add more. There we go. Look at that. Woo! See? The answer is yes. Wow. So pretty, isn't it? Just, it's amazing what foundry wax does to things, because, like I said, it's like adding leafing or foil to anything, but you can control it because it's a liquid. It's a, look at that. And it's done. It's permanent. It's on there. It's not going to flume. It's not going to do anything because it is completely set. Beautiful, right? So those are some things that we can Oh, I got to ink this one because I haven't and it's sitting here. It's calling to me. So let me just do it. And then we can move on to talk about stencils. And then I think we can wrap this up. So, all right, here I'm just going to add a little bit of spray stain. That's some rusty hinge because I do like that color. Take a little bit of blue in there. There we go. I'm actually putting stuff away at the same time. So to me, that's multitasking a little bit. Little salvage patina. There we go. Okay. Not bad. Could I have sprayed here? Yes, but it was here, and so that's where it's staying. Just going to do some of that color. Now, while it's drying, first I'm going to take a paper towel and kind of mop the sludge from around it. Try to move it out of the way, because paper doesn't like to dry in its own sludge. Remember that, right? But then I'm also just going to start where I see the color really pulling up dark. You can leave it there, right? We just talked about getting intense color, but if you ever want to soften the color, just pick some of that up before it dries. There we go. I like that better. Really beautiful. Gonna add a little water just to blend that. Nice. That's a beautiful color. That was a little bit of mind on there. I really like how that one turned out. Okay, I'm going to dab off any excess ink. Going to give it a nice generous drink of brown. Right, so generous drink meaning I'm not going to hold this up and just hit the edges. I'm going for it. All right, really give it that nice tone of brown. And then a little wet paper towel because I want to make sure that I don't have any ink sitting on the wax, because that's what's going to bring that shine out of the wax. And there we go. Wow, look at that. I mean, I just think that the detail of that is it's just beautiful because it has such a shine to it, such a reflective, but not the texture, right? So it's not like doing this with embossing powder or anything like that. And I can even take a little bit more off from the body right here, right? Bring some of that ink off. Just fun. So yeah, you can totally play with Foundry Wax in a lot of different ways. All right, so on this one, I'm just going to hit this. I just need to. Then I promise I'll move on. But I've been wanting to do this one. So as soon as I took it out of the tin, that's it. Once it's out, it's not safe anymore. Maybe I'm going to try this one with a brush. I think I might have better control with a brush. Let's see, right? Because here I can just try to go around the edges. That's what I really want on this one. Just add a little bit of that Foundry Wax. You could use your fingers if you're really good, like, you know, controlling a medium. That's good. I'm not pretty heavy-handed on things, but I don't mind. All right. Okay. Add a little bit more. Again. So again, a soft brush and just picking some of this up around the edges. Another thing that you'll kind of get used to is, you know, when you're applying it, I think I'll go on that stem too. When you're applying it to something, like this would be great splatter too. I'm not going to do it. When you're applying it, you can have other things around, right? There could be other things that could quickly get a little touch of paint or a little bit of wax. There we go. There we go. And there we go. Just trying to hold it in place. Okay. Look at that. Beautiful. Clean that brush real quick. Wipe this up real quick. All right. Take a look at that. Wow. Yeah. See, just that little gold. I don't know if you guys could see. There you go. Just that like little gold kind of gilded edge. Also, adding that little dry brush really put like can you see that little sheen of metallic over the top? Just because I was, you know, taking that brush and flicking that in from the edge, so it just brought in but I can still see the green. Huh, that's cool. All right, fun. So let's talk about stenciling. So when it comes to stenciling, I'm just gonna say this. This medium was not designed for stenciling, right? It just wasn't. It was designed for the ways that I've showed you how to use it. You know, applying it with a brush, applying it with your fingers, applying it as an accent. But you can stencil with it. But like with anything else that I've shared with you, there's just going to be a little bit of a learning curve on your part. And I think with any product, you need to work with it and give it its time. I don't know why it is in this industry that people are just so quick to judge a product, right? Because they want to compare it to something that they're comfortable with or that they've used. And that can work either way. I'm not saying that anyone's going to, talk down about this product, but I'm saying either way, I just don't think that product is meant to be compared with. There's a bunch of different products on the market, from inks to wax to papers, and everything has its own purpose and quality and use to that. So I think it's important to keep that in mind as a maker yourself before you do that post of like, well, this isn't this isn't that. Well, maybe it wasn't designed to be that way. So when it comes to working with waxes, you can use everything from a detailed stencil to a textured stencil, and you can work with different tools. You can use your fingers, you can use a blending tool, and you can even use a brush. What you have to remember about a stencil is that you're taking a flat element and you're trying to get medium inside it, okay? Not on top of it. So we know already from the demo that foundry wax was designed to go on top of something, right? That's its nature. Its viscosity is designed that it's really supposed to hit the high points and try to avoid the low points unless you want to push that in there. So for a stencil, we're actually trying to get it to do the opposite, right? We're trying to get that medium to go inside and not so much sit on the surface. That is the challenge of the stencil, okay? But it's doable. So let's show you how we can do it. I think I'm gonna I'll go back to statue. Oh, I'll do a little sterling first, okay? I haven't played around with this guy for a bit. So let's just take a little sterling, okay? Just put some of that out there. And for this one, we'll take a brush, take a stencil, place that down. I'm just gonna pick this up, and I'm just gonna start pouncing that through the stencil. Now the benefit of doing a brush, a couple of things. It's going to allow a little bit more buildup, okay? But I'm going to show you the mat because you're going to see like these little kind of dust almost, okay? It's going to give you a little bit of buildup on the edges, right? Because of the brush itself. But it's not a ton of medium. I do like the fact that on the wax, I can control a fade, right? But that little buildup is because when we're putting it on there, we're really kind of pouncing that in there. So now let's try the same thing with a blending tool. Hey Mario, can you, I'm gonna need probably a couple of domed foams. So I think they're right over there on the table. See that, the package? Thanks. Just because I'm gonna wanna change some foams if I go into another metallic because as I mentioned, sterling is really, it's a pretty strong one. Thank you. Okay, so for this, I'm gonna go in with blending foam and same thing. I'm gonna just do a little pounce. Now, blending foam, it's not going to release a lot of medium because it's a foam. It's just like absorbing that stuff. Now, if you quickly kind of burnish this, like rub it on like you would a blending tool, can you get that wax to go from a cream and like rub it on? Yes, and we did, right? Blending is going to give you much more of a smooth consistency than a blending brush, right? So here's the best part of working with stencils. Okay, let me just clean this up real quick. It gets a little messy because that time of it going from a liquid to a cream is pretty quick. If you add a couple drops of alcohol, just be careful with viscosity, right? That would be like trying to go in with a fluid ink and you don't want it to bleed under the stencil. But yes, you could thin it out if you wanted it to be just a little bit, okay? So here we're going to take this and just watch how it just transforms on craft. There you go. Same with this one. There you go. So a little bit of foundry wax goes a long way because you're getting that bright, vibrant look to it. If you wanted something that would be more textural, could you mix it with a texture paste? Not really. Again, the texture paste and this medium, it's not made from the same materials. Texture paste are water-based and this is a solvent-based. You could put it on top of a texture paste. Right after the texture paste was dry, you could go and rub it over the top. But for that, I would probably just use, metallic embossing powder because I like that better. But yes, you could play around with that. if you were going to use it over alcohol ink. You could use it over alcohol ink. You could splatter over alcohol ink. It's a different solvent vehicle than alcohol ink, so it's not going to react, but you need to heat it. So if you're going to heat on Yupo is not really user friendly, right, when it comes to heat. But if you just quickly did it, then I would suppose that would definitely work. But solvent wise, it's not going to damage anything from that aspect, as far as adding a little bit of solvent to alcohol ink, because it's a different solvent. So the solvent in this, it's its own beast. But stenciling, as you see, I'm gonna give it another go. Put on a new piece of blending foam. Okay, do a little mind. We'll add a couple of drops of ISO just so you guys can see that even thinner. It's still going to pose a challenge because, again, this isn't a medium designed for what we want it to do. I'm not going to mix it with the foam. That would be, because then the foam's not going to take it. There we go. Squeeze that out. If you put the foam in there, the foam would have sucked up all the ISO and it wouldn't have actually mixed it in. Okay, so let's just pick some of this up, pounce this on, pick this up, pounce this on, pick this up, pounce this on. All right, and you'll see that by the time we got down here, there's nothing, right? It's on there, but it's nothing. You'll see when I take this off, right? Not much of anything, but we haven't applied heat to it yet. So take a look. Nice. So from an effect aspect, you get a little bit of shine, right? You can see that. You get a little bit of shine, but let me just show you the difference when you have enough medium on its surface, right? Do I have a dedicated foam for this? I wouldn't dedicate anything to it because I wouldn't use the wax this way. But like, you would have to clean this with a solvent. So I would say that yes, if you were going to use this, I wouldn't use it on my ink pads because now it's full of metallic. It would contaminate anything it touched. So yeah, if you're going to use it, only use it for wax or try to clean it out. But I wouldn't even try to clean it out because I don't think you're going to get all the metallic out, and you would probably contaminate your ink pads. So if you have a foam, then definitely dedicate it to waxes because of the metallic, right? So here I'm just putting some on direct just so you can see the difference in intensity. And then I'm even just going to take this. So this is no texture. This again is just using my finger, just swiping it out, just so you can see the level of intensity when it's on there, okay? So let's start here, heat it up. There we go. You see the change. Cool. We'll go right across. You can just see it happen. Not wild. All right, so there's the difference. Like, you can see that incredible reflection, and you get some reflection in here. Obviously on some of the high points you really get the light. You know, you can even see it there, but not nearly as dramatic as you do when the wax is applied to its full thickness. Why? It is a leafing metal that needs to connect, and that's what creates that wonderful reflection. Okay, so have I tried to put this through a stencil on my finger? Yes. Was I successful? No. But you can in fact stencil it. It's just be ready for this kind of effect. And I actually like this. I mean, if I wanted to add just a little bit of metallic that was subtle over a background, I do like the fact that you don't really see it until the light hits it. So for that aspect, would I use it as a top layer, maybe over some collage that I did? Sure, because this could go over collage medium or ink or any of that. I think that could be really, really simple as an accent. But does it provide the same effect that it would when you use it on, you know, embossed paper or something raised? No. Could you apply it with a palette knife? Well, it's not that viscosity to apply with a palette knife, and by the time it does become that viscosity, it won't transfer, right? Because from a palette knife, it's not going to spread out like a paste will. It would actually just grab on the edges of your stencil like a cheese grater. But hey, you could play around. The beauty of any kind of new medium is the ability to play, right? So how are you going to clean this off your stencil? Just isopropyl or sanitizer. I'm just going to spray these with a little iso bath later, and then it will all come off. But really a lot of fun. I think that anytime there is a new product, what I love, of course, is obviously playing the way that it was designed to work. But I also know that once it hits the marketplace, once it hits the hands of all of you guys, man, the creative ideas and the techniques and the know-how is amazing. So let's just go through real quick. Foundry wax, available in 4 colors. There are 2 packs. These are the packs right here. 2 sets. This is how they are sold in the kits at open stock. But again, a very beautiful, very luminous, wonderful medium. And I think in the world of distress, the fact that we can essentially, you know, do everything from a picture frame to a Santa Claus, flowers, gears, butterflies, work with ink, work with oxide, work with glazes, right? That to me is a whole nother winner. So many different ways to apply it, whether you're doing it with your finger or a brush and just adding, I mean, really the reflection, I think, is what you're going to be mostly blown away by, because that's the part that I can't get enough of when it comes to these, is how metallic it really is once heat is applied to it. So I'm really happy. Huge shout out to the team at Rain